All right, folks, welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. Josh Turner, I'm your host, and we're going to have a heck of a show tonight. Getting close to Halloween, so, we're going to do a bunch of weird, spooky stuff that's spooky and weird and it's stuff. Not really, it's just going to be another show, but my shows are always good, right? And it doesn't have to be all gimmicky and all this, whatever that is up there. Anyways, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com, Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That is the coordinates to reach me, or you can hit me up on Messenger on Facebook. Today we actually started on time. We got everything going. Can everybody hear me good? Can everybody understand me? Because I hope you do. What we're going to do tonight is we're basically going to talk for about an hour about a few things and about some upcoming projects, but we're going to have stories. Don't worry about that. And then we're going to have a guest come on for about an hour, and then we're going to talk some more. But first thing I wanted to do was, God, what is that smell? It smells like somebody's hummus went bad or something in there, dude. Oh my gosh, man. Y'all eat some weird stuff, I'll tell you. Jeez. It smells like rotting buzzard butt or something. I don't know what the heck they were eating. So anyway, what was that you're eating on the way over here, Tony?
That was just
an assortment of grossness.
It's like a tomato soup. There was nothing else to really eat.
No?
I mean, we ate all the sausage and stuff that you got from Thorndale already.
Really? Because my wife was using that to put on my low-carb pizzas, but that's okay. That's fine. I'll just stay fat and die young. It's all right.
It was one of those 2-minute microwave tomato soups.
It's like I moved way over or something. Let me see if I can get over here. There we go. Oh. Come on, Alakazam. Let's do this. All right, there we go. You like the graphics, folks, with that weird Dogman looking creature? One of the things I wanted to talk about tonight when we get started, I want to tell everybody thank you for those that actually do participate, who show up. I did an impromptu live stream last night. I could do more of those. We talked about it as a team today. We talked about how we could maybe start trying to do 2 a week. I'm going to start trying to do a weekend thing with the Patreon. We're still not sure how we're going to do that or how that's going to happen. But, yeah, kill the music. We're still not real sure how that's going to happen. Sorry about that. I left the music on. But I want to do something that's for the Patreon members. It's going to be beneficial to become one, because if you're a Patreon member, not only do you get like a really cool swag bag if you're a $20 tier or if you're a $10 tier for 3 months, but you also you're going to be getting a lot of bonus content. There's going to be an extra hour or 2 a week where I'm going to sit and chat and talk with the Patreon supporters. That's something that you will get by being a Patreon member. Thank you, Liberty, for that donation. I was on the air last night for 2.5, 3 hours, I think, last night. And it was, we talked about all kinds of different stuff, and we did a lot of talking to the audience. I ended up talking to Ryan Edwards and Barton Nunley about the Patterson Gimlin film. In my opinion, I've already said this. I'm not going to get into it again. If you want to go back and watch it, yesterday they were debating it on the live stream last night. It's in the archives. It's on YouTube. Which all my shows will be put on YouTube going forward. We may just do one show that we drop on the other 13 platforms, and then from that show, hopefully after I mention it several times, that the hardheads will get it, that we are now on YouTube and that we are no longer dropping shows on those other platforms. Because it seems like they're not understanding. Like, they keep messaging me saying, why did you stop making content? Well, I didn't. Okay, we're at episode 201 of the hour-long episodes, and we are at, what is this one, episode 93 of the live stream? 92? No. 92 would have been last night.
Oh, that's right. This is 93.
So 93, I hope you labeled it. Did you label it correctly?
No, it's 92.
Okay, well, some more stupidity. But anyway. So what we got going on is last night was episode 92 of the live stream. Tonight is episode 93 of the live stream. So if you guys think that you would be down to have me come on and talk 2 times a week, then let me know. But, you know, I can't, there's just a problem. I can't just take off work and say I'm going to go do a live stream because I lose funds. I lose money that way. But I would love to do it. I would love to be able to trust and know that my audience is going to be there and be supportive. And like I said, a good way to do that is to, you know, buy merchandise or drop a donation on the super chat or become a Patreon member, you know, however you want to do it. But to help support the show, I have to have an incentive. And I'm not telling you that, oh, I'm not going to do this if you don't pay me. But for 3 years, I have kept the commercials down to a minimum. It looks like work is eventually going to be slowing down for us. It's looking that way in the next several months. We're probably going to be getting phased out of a couple of projects. So I think I'm going to start moving more toward doing the show and putting more of my efforts and my time and you know, and just putting more of my energy into doing this so we can take it to the next level. We just hit 20,000 on YouTube, and I think actually we're almost at 2,300 that quick. So as long as it keeps growing, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. One of the things I'm about to do is, like I've said before, I'm embarking on an ambitious project, and it's going to be centering around alien abduction. Now, what ends up happening, like what happened with Barton and me, we started out to talk about Bigfoot, and we ended up in alien abduction. So, you know, I talked to Daniel Jones about it. I said this last night for you guys that weren't, you know, privy to it from last night because you missed it or whatever. You know, it seems like it's all part of a greater whole. So we may start talking about alien abduction and it may end up in Dogman and then Bigfoot and who knows what else. Tonight, though, I'm going to talk about some different things. Kind of waiting for the chat to fill up a little bit, so a lot of people aren't like, oh, I'm late, you know, I missed it, whatever, blah, 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 and then, you know, they have to go back and whatever. We are going to talk about Dogman. I have a guest that's going to come on, but that's not for an hour. So what I'm going to talk about right now is some really interesting. Let me get it set up here, guys.
Thank you, NCCPP, for the $9 for the $10 donation.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who's donated. I must have sucked last night. I only had one person that donated. Thank you to that one person for doing that. But I try to do the best I can. Okay, so anyways, one of the things I was going to talk about tonight, and I thought it would be pretty cool because it's another project that I'm working on that's going to take off, and you're going to see a lot more of it happening because I believe that it's happening in our world. And we're going to talk about the Middle East. I've been doing a deep dive on that. I am going to be spending some hours pouring through some different material to try and find the stuff that I want to bring you, and what it is that it's I started off, you know, hey, I'm going to do one about the Middle East, and then I realized that there are so many different facets to it that it's almost impossible. Okay, I mean, you can't just write a book, even if you just said I'm going to focus on the Levant, you know, which is it comprises like 6, 7, 8 different countries right there. Which is like Palestine, or what was former Palestine, Israel. So you have Israel, Palestine, the traditional Levant, whatever. You have Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. That's the Levant right there. Part of Iraq, and then it encompasses part of Turkey, and it goes all the way down, and then it goes down into Yemen and all that. I mean, it's a vast area. But that at one time, that's what that region was known as the Levant. Now we know that the city of Jerusalem is supposed to be the site of this major upheaval that's going to happen When Christ returns, he's supposed to, it's Armageddon, and the forces of evil are going to do battle with the forces of good, and everybody seems to be aware of that. But the Middle East is a hot button issue no matter which way you approach it. Even when you're looking at it from a theological standpoint and you're looking at it from a religious standpoint, 3 of the world's major religions are right there: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So you have this sort of intersecting, thank you, Mr. T, for that donation. Mr. T, appreciate that. And so you have these intersecting religions, and you have these different beliefs. But one thing that people don't realize is that it's a very, very, very haunted place too. And I'm not talking about just, in the way of ghosts. There's lots of ghosts, okay? But in Jerusalem now, it's actually considered to be a very haunted city. And at one point, if you read the Apocryphals, and I don't know how many people have done that, but I've read a lot of the Apocryphals, and then there's 36 codices that were found in the Nag Hammadi Desert. If anybody doesn't know what that is, go and look it up. Thank you for that donation. Roddy Mom, RMMV, love this show. You're doing great, Wolf. Well, I started off just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to do the Middle East. And then I said, okay, well, let me just take it and do the Levant. And then I said, that's just too much. There's just too much to do. So I have to go station to station. And so I decided to pick a lane and let's go with that. So then I said, oh my gosh, if you just said, let's do Jerusalem, it gets really crazy. Now, I started going down the rabbit hole, and then the whole Knights Templar thing came up, and it was like, oh my gosh, just that story alone is enough to pull your hair out because there's so much involved. And then, of course, you have all the different books and things that have been written, some Hebrew and some in Arabic, some in Aramaic, and you're just like, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. And so I'm trying to narrow it down, but we are going to drop, I think what's going to be is probably 3 episodes starting off, and then maybe another 3, but it's going to focus on the Middle East, and it's going to focus on the country to country, region to region of the Middle East, primarily in the Levant region, talking about the different folklore stories that I've gotten out of there, because I do have a lot of friends who are from that area, Israeli and a lot of Arabic friends. And so I have a lot of information to give, stories that I've collected. I used to work with Lebanese and Syrians, and I got a lot of friends that are Jordanians and Palestinians, and I have a lot of friends that are Israeli. And one of my friends that's Israeli is terrified of the Dybbuk, and I always tease him about that. So I've been given lots and lots of stories from the people that are from that region, from that area. A couple of my friends are Kurdish, and they've given me stories too. And you start getting into the Kurdish, you start talking about the different, and they were Iranian Kurds. Of course, there's Turkish Kurds too, but these are Iranian Kurds, and that's Persia. Iran was once known as Persia. Now, if you know anything about any of this at all, Zoroastrianism, which predated Christianity, predated Judaism, it predated all these different religions. There were lots of stories and legends in the Zoroastrian tradition. Now, there is a group of people known as the Yazidi, and they are very interesting, and they have some pretty crazy legends and stories. And so I thought maybe we'll just start from one side of the Middle East, and maybe not even start in the Middle East. Maybe go to Greece, because Greece did colonize part of the Middle East. In particular, Lebanon is actually Phoenician. Their roots can be traced back sort of to the Grecian, and then you just kind of go, and then of course Asia Minor, which was colonized by the Greeks, and then taken over by the Persians. You're talking about BC, like way back, like 1000 BC. So you go from Greece, which is the cradle of Western civilization, it's considered that, and then you go all the way across the Middle East, and I figured we'd just end up in Iran or go all the way to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is not really the same. Pakistan is not Arabic. People don't understand that. Pakistan is actually, it broke off from India. It was at one time a part of India. It's in the Indus Valley, and now it's its own country, and it is predominantly Muslim, whereas India is predominantly Hindu, but they have a bunch of different dialects in both countries, huge subpopulations of different types, the different regions. So that will be another project down the road that will come into play. But by the time we're done, we will. I am trying to cover as much of the world as possible with the different folklore and focusing on the cryptids, not just the cryptids, but like these shape-shifting beings, creatures, whatever. And one of them I'm going to talk about tonight. Okay, and I did some research, and I looked for Dogman. And I did find many sources of Dogman in the Middle East. I was talking to my friend who's from Jordan, who's actually an associate of mine, he's a friend of mine, and he actually works part-time for me. And we were talking the other night, and I was on post, and I was doing my guard checks, and we talked about Petra. Now, Petra is from Jordan. Okay, now this is just giving you a little bit of what we're going to be doing with this project that's going to encompass the Middle East. This is just one aspect of it. Petra is said to be where Satan himself is imprisoned. Now, if you look at Petra, we talked a little bit about it last night. If you look at where it's at and what that is, it's a giant stone that they found looking at it from a satellite, and they stumbled upon this, and they're like, what is this? Well, when they go back and they look at the legends and the history of it, nobody is 100% sure, but they believe that they have uncovered a place that was covered. It was covered over because it was a bottomless pit where Satan and his lost army, they call it the lost army, are imprisoned in that pit. Now, my friend told me about Petra. He said he used to live there, and he said that you could go close to this place and you could hear shrieks and wails and howls, and around that area in Petra, they will hear all kinds of weird noises and stuff. Now, I talked to him and his dad, and they told me about these dog-headed creatures that they would actually, and we were sitting at the mall because his dad was a chef at the mall. He worked at a Arabic restaurant. And that's how I met them. And he told us, me and my nephew and a couple of my friends, about these dog-headed creatures that they would see, and they had a weird name. And they are considered to be a type of jinn, but they are not made of smokeless flame. They are not like they're not like normal jinn. Now, if you don't know what a jinn is, it's basically the Arabic version of a demon, okay? Think of like our demons, but not the same. Their version of these demons, they are another race that was created before mankind. Now, Tony, your stepdad was Muslim, and then he converted to what, Buddhism?
Well, he's converted from multiple things. I think he was raised a Christian, and then he converted to Muslim, and then he converted to Buddhism. And then I still don't know if he's like flip-flopping or if he's 100% Buddhism. So I'm not sure. But I think either way, he likes to look at, the entirety of all the religions and takes out what he, appreciates from each.
Yeah. When I first met him, he was Muslim. And then now he's, I don't know, spiritualist, but he's not Muslim. I wouldn't call him Muslim anymore, but I wouldn't call him Buddhist either.
Yeah, it's not exactly
sort of a mixture of the two or something. But one of the things that I learned from him was that there was a type of demon that does not correspond to the pantheon of demons that we have here on Earth at all. And they are actually not found. There's not a lot written about them. But if you go to the apocryphal, if you go to the Apocalypse of James, which was Jesus's brother, Jesus actually calls them by a name. He calls them archons. Now, it's a really weird thing because a lot of people don't know or understand what that entails. They don't know what these creatures are. they're not really considered jinn by the Islamic doctrine. And he was even a Sufi mystic that I was reading about, and he was having a conversation with a Muslim cleric. And both of these men had engaged in spiritual warfare with these jinn, and both of them had claimed to have had friendly jinn that actually partook or helped them within their whatever. Nothing I would not recommend at all. I mean, there are manuscripts and texts and all kinds of things out there, books written about, which we're going to talk about eventually. But I would not recommend going and reading these texts or these books, because it would be, not only would it be, I don't know how you'd say it, it's dangerous, but if it were to get into the wrong hands, it could possibly be dangerous to someone else around you, not just you. And so there's some of these things that I'm not going to give names to. I can allude to them. There's a couple books. One of them is from ancient Egypt, and it is what a lot of people believe it's where H.P. Lovecraft got his idea for the Necronomicon. It's an ancient Egyptian book, and I'm not going to give the name on here on the live stream. But these books can actually summon these things and open doorways. Now, I know that there was a satanic order, and I don't even know if you would call it satanic. My brother used to be a Satanist, and he's born again Christian now, but he used to be a Satanist, and he was looking into joining a group called the Order of Nine Angles. Now, you can look those people up. They have a lot of weird whatever, and so I don't know a whole lot about them other than what he showed me. Not my cup of tea. I'm not on that side at all. So, but what their ultimate goal was to, not only are they trying to defeat God, I guess you could say, from what I understood, was they were actually trying to bring across what they called the old ones, or the old gods, and they are trying to create a vortex, I guess you would call it, to bring them over. Now, this is actually, supposedly, according to the literature that I read, is not something that even the devil himself wants. The devil himself being whoever you want to call him, the head jinn, the head demon, whatever. The names change. I think there's more than one, which I know there is actually. But they don't want this to happen, because it would not only rip apart and destroy the very fabric of space and time as we know it in our realm, our universe. It could destroy them too. And so there is this weird story that I read in one of these manuscripts or whatever about two demons who had tried to trap Satan, the chief devil, whatever you want to call him. He's got different names, and they trapped him in a labyrinth. And what they did was, and this was supposedly what was the Middle Ages. Now, it actually corresponds with the devil being chained for 1,000 years. Like, he was supposedly he's locked up for 1,000 years, and he's loosed for a season. Well, according to this stuff, it was actually done by his own people, two of his lieutenants, and they were actually trying to bring across the old gods, or the old ones. And eventually their plan was thwarted or whatever. But it's just, it gets really weird. Now, I'm not saying this is all from that one group. I'm saying that this is one of the groups that believes like this. There are multiple sources for this. You can go and look at this yourself. I don't want to give out, I don't want to get into naming and all that stuff, because then something happens, and then, they'll be like, Josh Turner said this and that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that being said, what this has to do with Dogman is that this creature, okay, that exists in the Middle East, there is a precedent for it in the Middle East going all the way back to the 500s AD. Okay. We're talking about the 6th century. Okay. And there was I don't know if you want to call him a king, warlord, whatever you want to call him, a prince, Saif bin di Yazan. That was his name. And he's from the Hermeratic kingdom, called the Homeritic kingdom by the Greeks. But he was the leader of this, and his land or kingdom was a fiefdom in what is modern day Yemen. And he actually did battle and fought with, according to the traditions and the legends and the stories, a species of jinn called an adharit. The adharit is actually a wolf-like or wolf-headed type creature. And they were known as shape-shifting ghouls or goblins, whatever you want to call them. And they actually, what these creatures, they could shape-shift. And some people believe that they were people, but that they were inhabited by now this is another, you're going down the river, right? And then you see these different avenues, and so you take one of the little side creeks or whatever, and you end up somewhere. Well, that's what happened. I ended up going down the river to try to find more out about the Adharit. And I found out that that's pretty common. They're pretty common. People run across them. The Bedouins there believe in. I have a friend who she is actually from Morocco, but she's Berber. All right. Now she and her brother. I actually started talking to her brother. This was years ago when I used to work downtown. And her brother and her told me some crazy stories about running into these creatures when they were out in the desert in the middle of the night. They came from a Bedouin family. And so I thought, you know what? I got these stories about the Middle East, and one day I'm going to release them all because, like I said before, I thought, I'm going to write books. Well, that didn't happen, but I am actually writing now. But these stories were very intriguing, and they came across creatures that looked like Bigfoot-type creatures. They come across creatures that looked like giant scorpions. You start going down the rabbit hole, and it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. Okay. Well, there is a place, it's called the Well of Baurut, okay? And like I said, this is in Yemen. And this well is a giant hole. You can look this up, just go Google it, whatever. And they believe, they find all kinds of dead animals and even people around this well that have been exsanguinated, and people actually believe that vampires at one time lived in that well. And that there were different types of creatures seen crawling out of that well. And that one of the early attempts to go into that well and search, into that well, they lowered a guy down in there. He gets about halfway and he starts screaming, and when they pull him up, his lower part of his body's gone. It's been torn apart. Now, another anomaly that's seen around that area are these weird giant birds that don't correspond to any type of species of creature that we have on this planet. And then people, like I said, see these vampiric type entities flying in and out of this well. That place is in Beirut, okay? Go look it up. It's in Yemen, okay? Now, it's funny because, and not funny in a ha-ha way, but like, oh, wow, because this is the same place, the Himyaritic Kingdom, where Saif bin Yazan, where he fought the Adharit. We were a race of shape-shifting jinn, okay? Now, like I said, they were not like a normal jinn. Normal jinn are made up of like a smokeless flame, which I think is plasma, basically. They don't have, there's fire, but there's no smoke, okay? Which we know any man-made fire, there's going to be smoke, right?
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying, like, you know all about this because you went to Jamaat, which is, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, Chad would take me to the mosque, and we did Ramadan and all that, and it was a really spiritual experience. But it was just a prayer that he would take me up to all the time, and we'd sit down. And I remember one time, I finally, after I've been doing it for about 2 months or so, the head priest, the imam, I spoke to him personally, and it was me, Chad, and him, and he said, you're going to say the prayer by yourself with me, and I'm going to assist you, but it's just going to be us three. And it was just us three in the mosque, and we spoke and said the prayer, and it was pretty cool. And it was experiences like that which led me to have a really open, I think, everything about how I see the world. So, I'm always thankful that, Chad was there to at least open me up to new religions, and, so you could learn about them.
Yeah, and your mother being Buddhist, and then your dad, your stepdad, introducing, she introduced him to Buddhism, and he became a shaman. That's what he does, I guess, now. One of the things that I learned, and see if somebody says Legend of the Fire Spirits is a great book. Yeah, it is, actually, absolutely, James. James Strength, give a shout out to him. He said he's starting his podcast back up. I told him to give him a shout out, James. Yes, that is a good book. I would recommend Legend of the Fire Spirits, but it goes into detail, it goes into depth, but it can only go so far. And then you have to, somebody says called Afrit, but this is not an Afrit. An Afrit is not an Adharit. An Adharit is this ghoul, wolf-like creature. Okay, two different things. The Afrit is not the same thing. I know what you're talking about. That's something different. Here's what's weird, and where it gets even weirder, because it's already weird enough as it is, but it gets even weirder when you go down the rabbit hole of this stuff, okay? Like what I was talking about earlier about the archons. You're starting to hear more and more about this. I have a friend who's into spiritual cleansing. She goes to places and says, well, I cleanse and I do this and I do that, and she sometimes will come up against a creature or an entity that she can't handle. And here lately, you've been hearing a lot about them, and they will announce their presence as an archon. She would ask this creature or entity to leave this domicile, and it says no. It says, you got to leave in the name of Jesus, this, and that. And these things are very stubborn. And when asked who they are or what they are, they just say archon. It's really weird. I've had a couple remote viewers and psychics tell me the same thing, that they are coming up against these creatures. Now, what I said about Jesus, what he says to James, and you can go and look this up. It's in the Apocalypse of James. He says to his brother, he says, "Go thee away from Jerusalem, to leave." He says, "Flee Jerusalem, for it is full of archons." It's a city inhabited by archons. Now, what I believe he's telling James is to get as far away from there as possible, because these archons, they are not like any other demon, and to put it in layman terms so you can understand what I'm talking about is like, okay, you have your local toughs, right? Say you're from a town in the Missouri, Indiana, I don't know, South Dakota, whatever. You're from that town, in the town of Friendsville, right? You have your bad guys, you have your tough guys that live across the tracks, and they do what they do. These guys are bad. They smoke weed and everything, okay? They're terrible guys.
Villains.
All right, they're villains. So what they do, what they do bad guy things, right? Well, then you got these guys that come in from Chicago. They're not from there. And they're not concerned with you, okay? You're just prey to them. And your local toughs, they don't care about. They don't give a crap. That is what you're dealing with.
Same, basically.
Well, to us, they're the same, but not really.
No, I mean, to them, we all look the same.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Whether you're whatever. So that gets us into some other weird stuff. Where did they come from? Well, supposedly they come from deep space. Now, when you look at the translations, and it's hard for me to sit here and tell you because I don't want to tell you all the names of these books, and then you start going and reading, and then it gets you down somewhere you don't want to be. I will eventually start talking more and more about this, like when I do my deep dives going into the 1 hour episodes. We're going to do like a whole, but it'll probably be at least 6 hours worth of material, I would imagine. Hopefully I can get that done. But like I said, I have the alien abduction thing I got to do too, which kind of bleeds into this. Because if these creatures, these entities are from deep space, where at in deep space are they from? And it says that they only come in intervals. They're only able to access our world through certain means, they can only come through these like stargates, and they can only come through certain times. I don't know why that is. I don't know what the reasoning is. I know that it's supposedly in 1996 we were hit with an invasion of them. What these creatures do, what these entities do, is they go from person to person, draining your energy. Now, what they do is they hang out in places of a high population, like an amusement park or a theater or whatever, a place where there's going to be a lot of people, a train station, okay? That's where they're going to go. They're going to go to places where there are a lot of people. Nightclubs are very big for these things. And what they do is they find negative souls and they attach themselves or latch on to these negative people, and they make them more negative. And they suck energy from them. They're very much like energy vampires, but they are a type of demon that's not really from here. Now, what your stepdad told me was that when he was a child, and I know you know this is true, and I've actually talked to his mother about this, he was in a very, very bad car accident. And in this car accident, according to what I was told, he died. He's got a scar on his face that he's had since, childhood, whatever. Well, he claims that two of these archon type beings, they were demons from another realm. And I say another realm, they're all from another realm. But I'm not talking about the ones that exist around us, a right angle from a right angle. I'm talking about some weird demons from another place. Like they are from literally another world. And they came here and they took him and they put his soul into the body of that small child that passed, that now has grown up, who is your stepdad. And according to the belief and going by what I have talked to with your own mother and with him, his traits don't adhere to any astrological sign, nor do they adhere to a numerological life path, because he is what we consider to be a walk-in.
Yeah, and he's also has a lot of really weird, like he used to be blue-eyed, blonde hair.
Haired.
Now he has green eyes, and his hair is more like a brownish blonde.
Light brown.
Yeah, light brown. Which was, if you look at pictures of him, it's like you would have thought he was going to grow up to be like Prince Charming or something.
He was a towhead child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at him, I mean, he was obviously like 5 or something when it happened. So he has no memories prior to that. Now, unlike you millennials who've been drinking fluoride and eating, styrofoam or whatever it is, or burning it to keep warm, whatever it is y'all do when you're playing Call of Ops, whatever, this is what happens. You have no memories of your childhood, okay? You talk to a millennial and they're like, oh, I don't remember my childhood. And it doesn't help that you're taking copious amounts of whatever medications and whatever else. But we, Generation X, a lot of us do remember our childhoods. Well, Chad remembers everything from the age of 5 on. He has no memory of prior to the wreck, prior to the accident. Okay, so here's what's happened. These 2 demons, they stuck him in that body. And it was as a punishment of some sort, and then they left. Now, here is what that is what he believes. I mean, here's the weird thing. This Sufi mystic and this Muslim cleric, both are a form of Islam. One was actually Shia, and then the other one was Sunni. But I was reading about this conversation that they were having, and they were going back and forth, and it was probably something that would be pretty boring to the average person. But I was interested in their debate. They were debating Islam. I'm not Islamic, but I was listening and I was reading about their debate and whatever, because it was actually something that was playing, and then I was reading the translations, let's put it that way, because it was in Arabic, which I'm not fluent in. So I was reading the translations, and one of them said that his personal friend, who was a jinn, told him that to beware of the archons. Now, when the cleric heard I think the Sufi heard the cleric say that, he said that is absolutely correct. That is one thing they both agreed on. They agreed that the archon is the most dangerous of all of the. They didn't really call them jinn. Now, even though for Arabs typically it's a catch-all that goes back before Islamic faith. It goes back before the Quran. Okay, in that region of the Levant in particular, and in, of course, Iran and on, and all the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, all those different stands, you have all these different places. those regions in particular, they do believe that everything is just a jinn. Everything is just classified as that. Okay? So what ends up happening is you have all of these different regions, but the ones that are really well read, who are really, really up on their stuff, know that this is distinct from something. It's completely different than these other jinn. Now, going back to what I said about the Adharit, which is a type of dogman. I mean, that's absolutely what it is, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. And this guy, I don't want to butcher his name again, Saif bin di Yazan, whatever. He was the ruler of the Hermetic kingdom. He fought this species of jinn, and he had to defeat them. They had bodies, physical bodies, okay? To me, it sounds like this is what these archons are. It's what they do. They have the ability to animate a corpse. And I believe that that is what he was facing, was an army of archons. And I think it was one of the earliest of the archon invasions that we have records of. Because like I said, it goes in cycles. Now, I haven't gone deep down enough to tell you 100% like when the last one was. I know it was like in the early 2000s. Supposedly there was a really bad one in 1996. And there was all this upheaval and all these bad things that happened. I know 1996 would be a candidate for that because there was one really, really bad thing that happened that year that I can attest to. The Cowboys were defeated in the playoffs and they didn't go back to the Super Bowl that year. They should have. They really should have. They lost in Carolina. It was ridiculous, man. They should. That should not have happened. Thanks a lot, demons.
Thanks a lot, demons.
Yeah, so what they do is, besides stopping my team from going to the Super Bowl, they did all kinds of bad things. And supposedly what they do is, when you have mental illness of any kind, they find it, they latch onto it, and that is the voice that whispers into your ear that tells you, do this bad thing, because they get energy from that. Now you're saying, well, that's any bad demon can do that. Yeah, that's true. But these demons in particular, they use it and they go from person to person and it makes them bigger and stronger and bigger and stronger until they are like this huge bloated parasite with all this energy and power. They hang on to that energy and they use it to try and control politics, and to try and to influence people with wealth and to turn the world into a negative zone because they feed on negativity. And the world that they came from has already been completely destroyed. And so what they're doing is they're going into these other worlds and they're trying to do the same thing. Now, Mr. Wilson says, in Gnosticism, archons are builders of the physical universe and related to different planets. Very antichrist. Yes. And they are builders of this physical world because they are, like I said, like he just said, and I was getting to that. They're the architects of this world through their control of the mindscape, which is different than the soul. And it's hard I know, just follow me here, okay? It's different than the soul, okay? They are able to actually manipulate and control our destiny. They don't, and they don't actually get along with the demons from here, and I'll tell you why. Because they want power too. See, when Christians and Muslims fall into this trap of like, all the demons are just one bad thing, that's it, there's one kind. That's not true. Now, to me, it's like a gang. It's like a blood or a crip. I'm neither one of those, so I don't really care. It's the same. One of them's wearing red, one of them's wearing blue. Typically, that would be my thinking on this. But when it comes to these things, I believe that they are of a different, they're on a whole different level. Like there is evil, and then there is evil, like evil. That's what I think. And I think that some of these dog-headed creatures that were encountered, I think that there was a reason for why it was so important for this guy to have fought these creatures and tried to kill every single one of them, because they were creating more. You know, they were doing more. There wasn't just one. It was almost like a zombie invasion, but they were werewolves. Now, if you go back to the Sumerian text, there is actually a story there of an army of these Adarits, these physical jinn, who attacked an entire city of 10,000 people. They sacked it and they destroyed and devoured half of the residents, and the other half were just put to the sword and killed. They ate these people. Very, very weird. It's a story that is written in ancient Sumeria, and I can't even go back and find the source for that. I'm telling you, this is something I've read, and I know it sounds nuts, but this is, if you go and you look all this up, you'll find this information. But it's just something to give you food for thought and to be thinking about whenever we go into the Middle East and we start doing the stories on the Middle East. One of the things I wanted to tell you about too, see if I can find it, is the Red Wall. Okay, now I did a dive on this. The Red Wall, okay, when I started, and I went piece by piece, and I started finding the same things were popping up over and over again. The archons, the jinn, all these different creatures, all these different entities and different legends and different names, but pretty much all the same. The same thing with just different names. But one of the things I came across was the Alexander Romance. Now, if you go and you look this up, the Alexander Romance is a novel written about Alexander. It's an old book. But one of the things it talks about, which makes people believe that there is a lot of credence to what this book is, it's stories that were handed down since the time of Alexander the Great, going back to the 330s BC. Alexander was responsible for building the Red Wall. The Red Wall, if I can get this information out. Now, Tony, you did some work on this, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, let me find it. You want to go ahead and switch over to that graphic, Alec? So we can go ahead and show them where it's at.
And there it is right there. So if you look at this graphic, can everybody see this graphic? I hope everybody can see it. What we're looking at is the Great Wall. Yeah, see, the Great Wall of Gorgon, red snake of Iran, saw empires rise and civilizations crumble. What this is a Great Wall that was created to keep some sort of enemy out. And what that enemy is, we are not 100% sure. We know, let's go back to the Google Earth here. We know where it was at. Do you want to give that information, Tony?
The Wall of Alexander, or Red Wall, separates modern Golistan, a province in northeastern Iran, from Turkmenistan. So it's
called the Red Snake.
Mm-hmm. And it separates, or the Wall of Alexander has, I think, a couple different names.
Yeah, and the Gorgon, of course, is like Medusa. It's a snake-headed creature. So many people believe that was an entire race of being, who I also believe were from the Nephilim. Now, Nephilim is also a term that's used, like people use it. It's a catch-all, you know. It's like Nephilim. This is a Nephilim, Nephilim this, Nephilim that. But I also believe that there was something that was a lot more sinister to this wall. I don't think that this wall was built just for fun. You know, I don't think and I do believe Alexander did build this wall, and I do believe that book was actually trying to tell us that this really happened. And the wall, how long is the wall? I don't know exactly what the dimensions are of it.
It's hard to say because there's not much of the wall left. Okay.
Well,
but it's 5 kilometers east of the Caspian Sea.
Yeah, it's actually, there is a number for it, though.
And the distance is about 100 kilometers. And
100 kilometers long.
And then every 5 kilometers, there's a castle.
There's a castle, yeah. And every 5 kilometers, there's a castle. Okay, and then every 5 kilometers, there is, of the 7 languages of that time that were that were known to being whatever. And so they had different languages that they put inscriptions on there. They put runes on there. all these different in 7 different languages. And what they did was they put it up and down on every 5 kilometers. They inscribed it. Okay. The reason for this was to keep something out. And I don't think it was just human beings. I think that the wall, by it being created, it was some sort of barrier that I think worked towards keeping whatever it was on the other side of that wall, keeping it from coming south. We talked about the archons earlier, okay? I believe that these archons may have inhabited these adharites, just like they may have inhabited these gorgons, these other creatures. Who knows? They may have reanimated, or just as they can whisper into our ears and do things, manipulate us, they could probably do the same thing to the Nephilim. Who, because these things are probably from the same place. And of course, according to the Muslim tradition, there are good jinn, bad jinn, and in between jinn, they don't care. But if you take an evil creature that is negative, that's from a negative universe, supposedly their universe, think of the bizarro world, they're from a negative universe where they come here and they suck us dry, okay? They are going to do that to good guys, bad guys, in between guys. It doesn't matter. If you're into Star Wars, and if I don't know if anybody's ever read these books, but there was a race of being called the Yuzon Vong. I didn't ever really read much onto that. I know Scorpion's a big Star Wars guy. I don't know if he's in the chat today or whatever.
Well, they're basically like an outside parasitic force from a different galaxy that kind of just invaded the Star Wars galaxy. And the force and basically the rules of our galaxy doesn't really apply to them, or the rules of the Star Wars galaxy. So things like force or
didn't work on
lightsabers didn't really work the same way that you would expect. And that's why they were such a formidable force.
And they didn't believe, and we're talking about the Yuzon Vong, they didn't believe in weapons the way we did, or the way the Star Wars galaxy was more akin to our galaxy, our physical world, the laws of physics.
It was more like a bio, right?
Everything was biological.
Mm-hmm.
So they had like this, everything was biological. Their ships were alive, their weapons were alive, everything they did was a living being, whatever. Okay, so follow me on this. And this is just theoretical, me postulating on a theory that these archons that Jesus talks about in the Apocalypse of James, and he says, flee Jerusalem, for it is a city full of archons. When he's warning you about the archons, and he didn't say, there's just a bunch of devils there. Jesus casts out devils, and he would stand his ground. Jesus is not going to run away from anyone, but he tells James to flee, to leave this city, that Jerusalem is full of these things. There is a type of syndrome that takes place in people when they go to the Holy Land. Now, that's something that we can talk about too, but I'm fixing to have to call my guest, and so we're not going to have time to get into all of this. It says here, the Great Wall of China, originally called the Wall of Gog and Magog. No, the Great Wall of China was not the Wall of
Actually,
Gog and Magog.
The Wall of Alexandria is
called the Gog, yeah.
It's, because they call Alexander the Horned One because he's the son of
two-horned
Ammon.
one.
Yeah, the two-horned one. And they say that he built it to ward off Gog and Magog.
Yeah, to stop Gog and Magog, who I believe were archons. I believe they were leaders of the archons. And so, anyways, I don't know what that was. But anyway, what we're saying here, what I'm telling you is if you go back and you look at this and you start to research this stuff and you go just do deep dives on all this stuff, you will start to see like a pattern here. When these archons come over into our world, war takes place, all kinds of stuff breaks out. It's not business as usual, just normal bad guy stuff. It's like really bad guy stuff. And of course, it says Gog and Magog. It talks about in the Bible that these things are just completely off the chain. They're evil. And of course, the apocalypse and everything that comes with that. And I do believe that is what we're dealing with a lot of these evil entities. Typically when they possess something or someone, I think it is really bad to the point where, it really gets dicey for those trying to cast them out. Yeah, and so here someone says here, Jesus called out demons, no issue. The fact he told them to flee the city was pretty big, said it was full of archons. Yes, James, that's what I'm talking about. Jesus is warning him to leave, and it's not like Jesus is afraid. He's just telling them because he knows that these things are really bad. Now, if you go to, and this is going to follow me here, everybody know who the serial killer David Berkowitz was? David Berkowitz was the son of Sam. David Berkowitz, till the day he died, said that it was a dog or dog-like because he kind of he vacillated back and forth. He said it was a dog, and then he said there were multiple of them. There were many of these guys that he was involved with, and there were people who did a documentary, I think, not too long ago. I didn't get to watch it, but some people were telling me about it because I don't have time to do a lot of watching other than my research. And that there was more than one killer, but that he took the fall for it, but he was the main trigger person, but that they were being manipulated and talked to by this dog. A dog was used. So when you start looking at this creature that told them to do these things, he said that it was a dog that could act. He said it was his neighbor's dog, but it was a dog. It was pretending to be his neighbor's. His neighbor's dog wasn't a real dog, and that it could actually talk to him. And so he basically listened to this dog, and then he went and did these things. Now, if you look at all these people who commit these shootings and all these other things, a lot of them have a psychosis. And so it's a hot button issue I'm not going to get into here on my show, but what ends up happening is these people go out and they kill. And they oftentimes they will say that they hear voices. There have even been people who never had any history of schizophrenia or any mental illness. And the next thing you know,
all of a sudden
they're out stabbing, shooting, choking, doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Hearing voices.
Because these negative entities are telling them to do these things. Here's the rub. The wall of Gog and Magog, or the red wall, the red snake, the Gorgon wall, whatever you want to call it, Alexander's wall, was important because we thought that it was just a myth. And we thought that the Alexander romance was just a myth. They talk about him battling giant scorpions and fighting these mantis-type creatures and these werewolves and all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, this is all just a bunch of bull, right? This isn't what really happened. But we found out that the wall was real. They used to think that Troy was not real until
You found out where Troy was.
Yeah.
Thebes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
no.
I mean,
Troy.
Well, I was thinking, what did Alexander wipe out?
Oh, Alexander's Thebes.
Yeah, it was Thebes.
The Thebans,
right? Yeah.
This sacred band, he destroyed them utterly. And then he salted the earth and sold them into slavery because they wouldn't stop. Well, and then they found Thebes eventually where it was.
Yeah, because we figured out, like, hey, this area where nothing grows is probably where it is.
Yeah. Along with Sparta. That's the ruins of Sparta, which is no longer a city. Somebody asked me one day where Sparta was on a map. I said, it's there. It's just ruins. But there's a lot, and we're going to do deep dives into all these places, and we're going to talk about all these things. And I think that one of the things that you have to look at when you're looking at the wall of Alexander, that now we know it was real, and it was built for a reason. And these symbols that were put on that wall, that doesn't do anything to a human. Why would a human care? A human doesn't care if you draw a symbol of a snake or a cross or a sword or whatever. It doesn't matter. The only reason that you would do that is if you were trying to ward off something. Now, we know that in our realm, in our world, the demons and the angels and the humans and the jinn, or whatever you want to call them, because in Islam, they look at jinn as different than demons or whatever. Whatever. And somebody keeps saying, boo, Astros. Josie Wells, I like your handle there, but deal with it. And they're about to be the World Series champs starting Friday, so get used to it. So here's the thing. They have to play by rules. We know that when these things are conjured up, and I'm not going to tell you how, and I know how, but I'm not going to tell you how because that's not something you ever want to do. I don't care how messed up your life is going. You don't make it worse. Okay? I'm just going to tell you like that. inviting any kind of demon or anything into your life is going to make it worse. One of the things that you do is you use sacred geometry to keep them at bay when you conjure them up. And I've heard of people doing this, and I've seen people who have dealt with these things who have lost their freaking minds. One of my brother's friends is literally an insane person now. I mean, he's crazy. I mean, the guy is just, he's nuts. I mean, and it's because he conjured something he shouldn't have, and it attacked him. And I don't even know the whole, I don't even want to tell that story because I don't know the ins and outs of it, because I've never been able to talk to the guy to get a straight answer from him. He's crazy, and he lives with his mom and dad. But his mom and dad are getting old, so eventually he's going to be out there running the streets doing who knows what, because he was encountered demons that he shouldn't have been messing with. So maybe one day we'll hear about him on TV. But anyway, this guy, he conjured these demons up, and he tried to use sacred geometry to control it. Didn't work too well, okay? But there are rules and laws and things that we are supposed to follow. Now, you have outlaws, human, demon, whatever. They're going to do the bad thing. They're not going to follow the rules or laws, and some of them are chronic offenders. You know that as people. They're just called career criminals. Same thing in their world, in the world of these others. But the archons are 100% always evil. There is no in between. They're negative, and everything they do is negative, and everything they try to do, it's all negative. There isn't anything good because their world is negative. Now, if you were to go back and read the Kabbalah, and I can say that because it's a very popular religion, especially in Hollywood, to read the Kabbalah and follow it. Now, if you go back and you follow that, which I don't, the Kabbalah is one of those books. It's very weird. When you read it, it talks about demons as being, they were from another universe that turned in on itself, and for all intents and purposes, it was compressed. So these demons are like these mismatched, mixed up entities who came from that other universe and ended up in this universe that's adjacent to ours. I don't think that's what the archons are. I think what they are is something completely different. But I do believe that they can infect your mind, and they can create, somebody says zombie on there. Yeah. I think that they can infiltrate your mind to the point where you turn in on yourself. And there is an actual syndrome connected to it called the Jerusalem syndrome. And you can actually go and you can look this up too. And it happens to people who travel to the Holy Land. And I believe that part of that could be from these archon entities. Now, somebody said CERN going to bring out entities. Yeah, CERN is doing their job as far as bringing these across, opening the abyss. Now, these creatures, we know that demons inhabit our world. We already know this. They've been here for a long time. But it also talks in Revelations about Abaddon. Look up the verse on that. Look up where Tony's going to look that up for us, where it says that they opened the abyss. And it talks about Abaddon. Okay? Now, why would it be so important that they opened up the abyss? Like, what's the big deal, right? Because we're already dealing with demons. They're already here. They're already all over the place. So why does it matter if they open up a thing with more demons? It's the same thing, right? You would think, right? Wrong. Because those demons that they're opening up from the abyss are able to come over to our world in hordes and numbers that we cannot possibly fathom. And it's going to come down to all the holy books in the world telling you that it's going to get really, really bad, and the worst thing you could imagine times 10, because there are going to be so many of these creatures roaming the earth that we can't keep track of them all. Get this. The Red Wall was built with the help of jinn. According to the traditions of the Middle East, the Levant, all these different peoples that they believe in this, they really believe that jinn actually helped them build this wall. Why would they work together? Two species that are never supposed to interact. And I'm a firm believer in that. We're not supposed to interact with them. They're not supposed to interact with us. God put a veil there between us and the demonic world for a reason. They're on their plane of existence. We're on our plane of existence. Okay? Somebody says, y'all think CERN summons demons, 5G too? I don't know about 5G summoning demons, but I know that 5G could correspond with another archon invasion, and it could be a way to get archons into our minds. It says here, my listeners always bringing the heat here. They said, I can't read the name because this part right here, it says the ones from the abyss could maybe have physical form like humans. Yes. And I think that could be what we're dealing with these dogmen and these reptilians. You know, look up the lost city of Iram. That's another thing I'm going to talk about. That's the city of giants. It, like Teotihuacan in Mexico, was avoided by the inhabitants in that region like the plague. They said that the old ones, these giants, that they created those cities. They made those cities. Later, when humans did interact with the inhabitants, they were filled with reptilian type beings because the giants were gone. And there was battles and things that took place, like at Baalbek in Lebanon, and then you go and you read about this. It's like Iram. If you read about Iram, and it's IREM, it was the inhabitants of giants. Now, the Aztecs in Teotihuacan, they were terrified of it. They didn't go toward it because they lived in Tenochtitlan, and Teotihuacan was over there on the other side of the lake, and they were like, Spaniards were like, wow, what's over there? We don't go there. Why? It's filled with monsters. Monsters, literally. Gator-headed looking creatures. Jaguar-headed creatures. You know, basically like, think of like Zyptotec or Zepitotec, whatever his name is, the jaguar-headed deity. The Solotl, the dog-headed deity. This was the inhabitants of devils. They didn't go there. It could be argued that they were devils themselves, considering what they did as far as human sacrifice. But they were terrified of it. They said that it was built by giants. So here you have these parallel cities, and it goes on and on and on. There's these cities that have been abandoned all over the world. And they said that these were the habitation of the gods. Giants, they lived in the earth in those days, right? This stuff goes back to pre-flood. I'm talking about the pre-Adamic races of man they were man-like, but they weren't man. Now, I believe that these demons these archons could be from a place very similar to where the Anunnaki came from. That's their demons, their baggage. Because they go to these worlds, I'm talking about the Anunnaki, take the resources, suck them dry, and leave them, all messed up, and then the archons come looking for a feast, and boom. I'm not saying this is true. I mean, somebody, probable Muppet, is laugh out loud. Maybe it's a joke to you, okay? But what I'm telling you is, I can tell you that I have done a ton of research on this. And I've actually done more research than you, okay? So you laugh, have fun with it, whatever, or you can go and you can look it up and do the footwork yourself. I have done a ton of research, and I'm going to do a ton more, and I'm going to release a bunch of episodes, and we're going to go into all of this, okay? And you're going to be able to get the full load of what I have uncovered. All I'm doing right now is giving you a teaser, basically a taste of what I'm working on, okay? Because that's how my mind works. I'm giving you what I am doing, what I am studying, what I am, and if you can't follow, that's understandable. I'm going to try and bring it all home in a series of shows, and we're going to do just like I did with the Barton Unley, the Bigfoot stuff, and you guys can make up your own minds. So that being said, I'm going to take a short break really quick. Give me 2 minutes, and then I'm going to make a phone call, and we're going to talk about some Dogman with my guest. And I'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and I'm going to make a phone call. That dog looks like Banjo, doesn't it? Oh, boy. So let me get my guest in here. So probable Muppet had to be kicked out because he's probably a Muppet. He was like, okay, Jimmy, my boy, this is so ridiculous. I know so much about all this stuff, and this guy, he's not smart. What? Did somebody... Okay. I had it. Leave it alone.
You're not logged into your account.
It's logged in right there.
Logged into Paranormal Round.
It doesn't matter. Okay. So we're going to argue about it? It doesn't matter. I just need to make the phone call. I don't care if I'm logged in as bubblish as fisheye. So let's go ahead and make that call. Oh, God. And there it is. What's going on here? Well, that's good. The page has been updated. That's awesome. It just keeps telling me that over and over again. Right there. Boom. It's very quiet. I don't know if the fans can hear that. Can you at home hear this?
Hey.
Hey, Morgan.
Hold on. Just gonna turn video on. There we go.
So do you want to put it on video?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Dismiss. Okay, so we're just going to do audio then.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. All right. So let's see if everybody can hear it. Can everybody hear her? Good. We're good to go. Okay, Morgan.
Awesome.
So this is Morgan Knudsen. Am I saying your last name
Knudsen.
correctly? It's not Knudsen, is it?
Yeah, it is. Knudsen.
Is it really?
Yep.
Wow. I thought it was Knudsen, just like with the K is silent, like no. K-N-O-W.
That's the UK version of it, the English version. The Norwegian version is with the K.
Okay. All right. So I don't know if you've been listening to the show up to this point, but trying to turn your sound up. I need her sound turned up a little bit, guys. I'm having a hard time hearing you. The audience can hear you, but I'm having a hard time hearing you. So we're just going to get that straight real quick.
Yeah, no worries. If you need me to chat and just do a sound check, then I'll do that.
I think now I got you. I can hear you better now. Okay,
Awesome.
So Morgan, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Morgan Knudsen, and I co-founded Entity Seeker Paranormal Research and Teachings here in Canada. I've been in parapsychology for about 20 years. A lot of people probably know me from shows like Haunted Hospitals and Paranormal 911 and The Haunting and whatever else. But mainly known here for my program Teaching the Living and events and live events and stuff that I do here, just trying to spread the word about parapsychology and teach. My great-great-grandfather founded the first, or was the president of the first Paranormal Association in the early 1900s, late 1800s here in Canada out of Toronto. And yeah, so that's me.
Yeah, and so, and I believe you friended me right after I had a Halloween last year. Right before Halloween, I had like Ken, I think, and Lyle and Barton on, and you were like, hey, you know, these are my friends or whatever. And I was like, okay. And so we became friends. And so what is your main area of expertise? Like, I say we're not experts, but what is your,
I know what you mean.
What's your wheelhouse?
Yeah, I think parapsychology and psychology is really where I like to sit, because I'm a really big proponent of understanding the lessons and the the concepts behind parapsychology and where it's going. So I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm not anything, I'm not like the running around with cameras screaming in the dark kind of thing. I prefer the education side of it. I do a lot of post-secondary teaching and stuff like that here in Canada. And so I like to let people walk away from this subject matter with a feeling of empowerment, and trying to get people to approach this stuff from a matter of curiosity rather than fear, because I think fear is such a big problem in both the US and Canada, and it has been for a really long time. And I think it creates a lot of problems in people's interpretation of things, interpretations of events, and it just creates this feeling of disempowerment. So that's my hope, is that my books and stuff like that will start to turn people's opinion a little bit.
Okay. And so you're basically telling people not to fear, like you're saying, don't fear the Reaper, basically, right?
Yeah, like totally. And I think what happens is that within our culture, we've got this sort of fear-driven culture between our media and our entertainment and all of this kind of thing, and it's all fine and dandy when it's fun and for entertainment, but at the end of the day, I think it does have real repercussions, especially for this industry, because this field gets a lot of flack to begin with, and if people are just approaching this from fear, I think they're misinterpreting a lot of different events, because when you're looking at something through that filter, it can be a real negative thing and stop the learning process and cause you to stop asking questions. And I think we should be asking questions.
Oh man, I agree with you 100%. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people said, "Oh, I want to be afraid. I want to be," and that's fine if that's what you want, is to be afraid. Okay, that's easy to do, but to work through the fear. Really quickly, I'll tell you a real quick story. This isn't a long, drawn-out thing. You're the guest. I want you to talk, but when I was doing research on the Brazilian exorcist, the wall behind me, there was a nail place behind me. It was 11:30 at night, and I had my friend Rodrigo on, and he was doing the translation, because I don't speak Portuguese. I speak several languages, but that's not one of them. And he was actually doing the translation for me with this woman, and when I started hearing noises, like weird language coming from the other side of the wall, and this wall, it's been soundproofed. Yeah. Like I was like, I wish I wasn't afraid right now, but I had to stop, and I had to go outside, and I looked, and it was like 11:30, and the whole plaza was empty. There was nobody here. So I called my wife, and I'm like, I'm actually really scared right now, and I literally had her on FaceTiming, and she could see the snot bubble coming out like the Blair Witch. I was like, I'm so scared right now, and she was like, shut up, stop being afraid, do what you got to do, and I'm like, okay, I'll stop with the dramatics. But no, I was literally afraid, and I called her, and she calmed me down, and she says, well, you can come home if you're a big chicken and you don't want to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I finished it, and I'm glad I did, because it was a very interesting topic, and I was actually able to help the woman somewhat, by getting it off her chest or whatever. But dude, fear comes into play big time in a lot of this. When I have to read some of these emails, I'm sitting there going like, what is this, dude? So yeah, I totally get that, and I think it does help if you can work through your fear. So that is a good thing. I'm glad that that's something that you can do, and you tell others to do that, because fear can stop the learning process in its tracks. Boom.
Oh, absolutely. And it causes us to misinterpret what we're reading and seeing as well. And that can be a problem. And it's not that, we go through life, or we go through this field and there's never fear. I mean, it's going to be there. That's a given at some point. I mean, sometimes that's our instinct kicking in, is that it's telling us something. But I've learned over the years that if we can be the observer of the fear rather than be immersed in it, then we can find the lessons that are within it, and we can figure out whether this is something that's learned. Is this a learned fear? Is this a response that I'm telling myself about a story that I'm telling myself about the event? Or is this something where my instinct is telling me that something's off and I need to listen to it? And I think being able to work with yourself and really look internally is a really huge benefit to what we do in the paranormal field, no matter what area that we're in.
Yeah. And one of the things that you had talked about, because I saw you in one of the we're in some groups together or something. I remember reading some of your material that you had posted on there, and it was interesting to me, and it was about Dogman.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how we started talking about it, but you were in the back of my mind, and I was thinking I really want to interview this person because I had seen you post some things in groups, and you're probably like me, you're probably in 200 of them. And
Sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, and some of the stuff that people post in these groups is completely ridiculous and asinine, and you're just like, what is this?
Yeah, it's crazy as hell.
Yeah, so you kind of have to sift through it, and you get a mountain of stuff every day, and you're going like, okay, this is just another day in the life of a researcher. But you had some very interesting. You had a very interesting take on Dogman. Now, I'm the kind of person, like, even if I don't agree with someone's take on something, like Ken, I'd say Ken Gerhard and Barton Lily, two of my best friends. Lyle, we're very close. We've become closer over the last couple of years. All the work we've done together. But we were eating dinner the other day, and I told Ken, I said, we've become such good friends. I was like, but I don't like your stance on Bigfoot's very rigid. And he's like, well, I don't like your stance on Bigfoot. But we're like, hey, we cheers, and we agreed to toast to that. And he's somebody that I can work with. I don't care that we don't believe exactly the same. Me and Barton, we don't believe exactly the same. I don't believe exactly the same as Lyle or David Weatherly or any of my other friends. But one of the things that we can agree on at the end of the day is agree to disagree, and we respect each other. So I think you have a little bit of a different take on this subject. And what I like to do with the show is keep it fresh. And because I don't want to sit in an echo chamber, just like I like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that likes diversity. And I like the fact that I can talk to all these different people because of all the research I'm doing right now. I'm dealing with a lot of my Arabic friends, and it's interesting to be able to get their take on the paranormal because a lot of times people just think of the paranormal. They're like, okay, I think of America. This is where we're at. This is what we're dealing with. They forget about the Far East, the Middle East, the Near East. They don't even think about any of that. Europe or Australia, they all have their own culture of what would be considered paranormal. And so you had like some sort of a take on Dogman. Did you want to get into that and talk about what you were dealing with?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, just to add on briefly to what you just said as well, is that I teach a lot of social work and psychology programs and stuff like that here in Canada with my program Teaching the Living, and that's the one thing that I was exposed to constantly. It was people from different cultures from all over the world that would come and do these post-secondary courses, and you learn to realize really quickly that every single person is experiencing the same thing, but they have a filter on it because in their culture, every culture reads it as something different. Each culture has a meaning that we're placing behind the phenomenon that we're witnessing, and yet you go through all of this phenomenon, whether it be reincarnation or whether it be poltergeist phenomenon or psychokinesis or whatever it is, and everybody's got a different take on what that is. And so for me, when I look at stuff like whether it be Dogman or Bigfoot or a haunting or whatever it is, my first response is not, do I look at this subject and demonize it or, lay my own labels onto it, but what is this phenomenon here to teach us? And so that's kind of how I've looked at Dogman as well, is, what is it here to teach us? What can I learn from this? And so it's less about me sort of overlaying my own beliefs on it, but rather what am I taking away from these experiences? So in Alberta, there's been Dogman sighted, just like there has been, all over the world. And a good friend of mine, who I work with very closely, has a number of them on her own property, or they've been seen on her property. And for the last number of years, I really try to take away what am I learning from this, and there was a lot that I did, and I kind of look upon them with some gratitude, because not only did they make me start to expand my own my own learning curve, because as I say, my core research is parapsychology. but I had to expand myself in my understanding of nature, of what the universe is capable of. My own limited understanding of what it was capable of. So the experiences that I've had around that subject, I've been very grateful for that. I mean, there's definitely been some hair-raising stuff that's gone on, but at the same time, again, if you're taking the label of fear off of it, it's like, okay, well, what can I learn from this? And it's just been very enlightening. The whole thing has been very enlightening.
When you had, your Dogman experience, you said was not negative, right?
Not at all. And I mean, they've lived. My friend Terry Lynn Blake, she's a medium and whatnot as well, and her and her husband have been living on this property since about 2006. They broke ground on it in 2006, and so I mean they've been on that land for a long time. Never ever had any trouble with them, and my experiences out there have never had any trouble with them either. But again, we haven't gone out there looking to antagonize or be fearful, or we're not coming into it that way. And what I've found over the years, especially with no matter what paranormal activity you're dealing with, or animal for that matter, if you want to call it that. No matter what you're dealing with, the energy that you bring into that space is often very much mirrored back to you. So you come into a space and you're on edge and you're fearful. Well, go try to pet your neighbor's dog while you're on edge and fearful and see how that works out. It's one of those things, like you've got to be conscious of what you're bringing into the space, and that's something that I've always done. So all my experiences there have been quite good.
And your neighbor, the people that you said that you've dealt with this Dogman, you've seen these creatures with your own eyes?
I saw one once, yeah, and this one actually was quite recently. I've seen him once where I could actually see facial features, and oftentimes when you do see it, it's the eyes. It's the famous bright eyes in the woods. They have seen him multiple times, quite close, run into him by accident a good few times on the property. And these two of the most competent people I've ever met in my life, unshakable. And they've run into him a good few times, as has their daughter and has their son-in-law. And every time the encounter, has been quite neutral. I wouldn't say happy, but they're quite neutral. So I mean, they've been living there for a really long time, and they've been fine with it. So I mean, it says something.
How many are there?
I've counted 3, and by counted I mean seen 3 sets of eyes at once. So we're pretty positive that there's 3 in the area. I won't say necessarily on the property, because we don't know where they originate from. We just know that they frequent the property. But we know 3 for sure. And I mean, but for every rat you see, there's 50 you don't. So it's hard to know the exact number.
Oh. So what I'm hearing is you claim that these creatures are benign, but you're calling them rats.
It's just an expression.
There it is, folks. Yeah. They're rats. They need to be exterminated. Well, that's how people think. They hear you say that, and they're like, they just take that out of context. She said they were rats. They're bad.
Yeah, and they're not at all. I mean, at least these ones. I mean, everybody's got their own, experience with this phenomenon. But I mean, we can only attest to our own experiences, and our own experiences have been quite, as I say, quite neutral. Not up or down. Just we've been there and it's been there. But
do they feed them?
No, they don't. Yeah, no, they do not. I wouldn't know what the hell to feed them. What do you feed them? Like chicken? I don't know.
The hearts
like,
of
what do
damned
you do?
souls.
Like,
I have no idea.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what but it's hard to know too much about them at all, because nobody knows what their territorial range is. I mean, we have no idea. There's so much about some of this phenomenon that we just have, you can just guess at, and I know people like to say, well, it's associated with burial grounds or whatever. Well, I mean, if you throw a rock, you're going to hit a burial ground in Canada.
Yeah, that's here too.
Yeah, and same thing in the States. So I mean, is it associated with that? can't say that. Correlation is not causation, and so I mean, there's a lot of questions. But I mean, all we can do is just observe the phenomenon as best we can, and try to piece some conclusions together.
And in your experience, because you are into parapsychology, are these things some sort of ethereal creature, the ones that you're encountering, or are they just absolutely flesh and blood, or do they have a mixture of metaphysical? I mean, what are they?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's a question that we've posed to ourselves about 1 billion times. And I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that really everything has a non-physical component, including us. And so I think once we can get our heads around the idea that we ourselves have this non-physical component, then it becomes a little bit easier to imagine that there's other things that have a blend of that same component. There is definitely some sort of a non-physical side to what we're seeing. We had an incident at one point where we were walking through the trails, because the property actually has very thick trails and woods and whatnot, and we heard a huff, like a really gruff huff, like you'd get out of a large wolf or a bear or something like that, and a burst of mist that we actually ended up catching on film. And it was the strangest thing, and it just sort of exploded in front of us. And so what it is, I couldn't even begin to guess, but I think there is definitely some sort of a non-physical component to whatever the heck these are.
Yeah, that's weird. So you saw some sort of like mist?
Yeah, it was, as I caught it on film. My colleague Terry Lynn actually felt the huff. It was close enough that she actually felt it on her face, and then the mist sort of exploded in front of us, which is why it ended up caught on camera. But yeah, it was just the strangest thing. So, but I find with any of these properties and any of these areas where that have activity that's right off the wall and unexplainable, you just kind of have to put a pin in some of this stuff and wait to get some more pieces so that you can start to patch some of it together. And that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I definitely don't proclaim to be any kind of expert at all.
I've never seen you say anything like that. I do think you're expert at one thing, the fire twirling.
Oh, thank you.
That looks pretty. I tell you what, the first time I tried to do that, I'd be caught on fire, and it'd be the end for me. They'd be like, "What happened?" Well, he tried to be like Morgan, and he burned himself to life.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, though, because that was one of my, I think, core lessons in mastering or beginning to understand and learn about my own fear and my own limits. And that was one of the reasons why I picked it up, was because I had a couple of very, very, very good teachers. And the first thing I started with was actually fire breathing. I was actually offered a chance to learn fire breathing. And it's one of the more dangerous of the fire arts that are out there. And I thought, man, if I can learn this, something that is almost taboo even in the fire world, where it's like, not everybody a lot of people will fire eat, but they won't necessarily fire breathe. And thought, you know what, I'm gonna challenge myself to this. And it was one of the best things I ever did. And then from there, I got into fire eating and stuff like that as well. But every time I even engage with fire, I go through the same process. I'm making sure I'm in a positive place. I never pick it up when I'm feeling negative. I'm very conscious of like what I'm dealing with. That flame is wild. It's your partner in this kind of co-creative dance, but that flame is going to do what it's going to do. And so, it makes you become more present. It makes you it forces you into that position, because if it doesn't, it's going to bite you. So for me, the fire has just been a wonderful meditative technique, but also, it brings you back to that center, to be like, hey, you have to be present and paying attention to yourself in order to do this in a way that's going to turn out well. Yeah.
It's weird because like you're talking about the fire. Now, I have actually eaten fire. That's something awesome. I have done that in the past. I was at Tony, your mother, when she made the pho.
Yeah, she believes in putting just pure fire into the anything she cooks. I actually put on my post that immigrant mothers just love poisoning you little by little to toughen up your gut.
She's a Vietnamese, and she like, you don't like, don't eat. And I'm like, no, I love it. My mouth is on fire. I'm just, I turned
There's a
into
method to a
Bowser
madness,
from Mario. I'm just like, wow, that's great. I like hot stuff. My mother, being from Mexican, descent, and I loved the picoso. I liked the hot, but I was like, okay. And then she brings out this black tar-like substance and puts it in the pho, and I'm like, what is this? And Tony's like, it's liquid death. I'm like, whatever. I took a bite, and
least he's honest.
steam came out the side of my ears. The only thing that came close to that was an Amish pickle that I rolled in cayenne because I thought I was being macho, and I ended up having to open the window in the middle of winter and try to breathe in the cold air, and I was drinking every substance known to man to try to not die. But those were two of the hottest things I've ever encountered.
Wow.
So that's as close as fire eating as I've ever come or ever hope to come.
Well,
You do it, and it's pretty crazy. I've seen some of your stuff on
Thank you.
Facebook, and I was like, it's pretty cool.
Well, what's
How did you
interesting
get into
about-
that?
Well, what's interesting about fire eating is just to touch on that, and I think this is one of those things again where you have to be conscious of the story you're telling yourself. There's a number of tricks, including actually putting the torch in your mouth and extinguishing it, that immediately people think, oh, it's fire, it must be flaming, raging hot, that must be what it is. But what's so interesting is that because you're working with specific fuels, you've got to be conscious of whether the fuel's in liquid state or gas state. There's a lot of science that goes in behind fire eating and what you're doing, or otherwise you kill yourself. But what's fascinating is that if you get it within that certain state and you get it right, the fire feels no worse than lukewarm coffee. And again, your head is telling yourself, oh my God, this is, what am I doing? This like fire's not supposed to go in your face. Like what's going on? But when you get it right, it's really, I've had hotter drinks than I have fire. So again, it's like, it's kind of beating that dialect that you've got in your head that, okay, you were taught all your life, this shouldn't be happening. But there's this gray area in which you can actually accomplish and make this stuff happen, which is something that I teach oftentimes in my paranormal classes, to show people that it's like, be careful what paradigm you have in your mind, because that paradigm might be, you might have had that paradigm for 30 years, but it doesn't mean it's right. You've really got to start to challenge. And just because something looks black and white, it doesn't mean it's always black and white. But I got into it because, as I said, I met a couple of incredible teachers, one from Australia, and who ended up coming out to Canada to do classes, and a really fantastic teacher. So I learned from him, and then I'd say learned from another teacher who taught me the fire breathing. And I was just really fortunate to kind of have that circle, because I know a lot of just entertainers and things like that, and I just took the opportunity when I had it.
Oh, that's interesting. So, being that fire is one of the elements, have you ever thought about that? Like that is like you had some sort of like I mean, when you were younger, were you attracted to fire, or did you think, hey, this is something I'm interested in, or did it just kind of happen?
Never. I never would have in a million years have thought, like, had you even asked me about this, 15 years ago, I would have laughed. I would never have seen myself doing something like this. But I've always loved theater. I've always loved being able to convey a story, and I've always loved being able to see audiences have some sort of a positive takeaway from whatever you're putting out there. And I saw this as a really great opportunity to demonstrate something that otherwise people might not understand. And one of the things that I do in my classes is, I talk to people about, how many people got the lesson that, fire's hot, fire's too dangerous, you can't touch it, and of course everybody puts their hand up. I mean, everybody got that lecture as a kid. And, from there, I just say, that's true. It's not that it's not true, but we have to be careful about this gray area, that there's science in there. There's a scientific loophole that's in there that allows us to do the complete opposite that allows us to do this. And usually all the classes they're looking at me like, oh, you've got something on your hands, or you've got some sort of, it's a magic trick of some sort. No, it's not. It's science. It's just science. It's just you don't understand the science yet. I'll explain the science. You don't understand it yet, but it doesn't mean that it's a trick. It doesn't mean that it's a hoax, and it doesn't mean that it's fake.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say it's a bit like magic, to where it looks more incredible than it might actually be, where it could be just a lot of practice done really well, really quickly, and that's what makes, like sleight of hand and illusions look so well, because it's just an insane amount of practice and an insane amount of dedication to this art. And I feel like it's the same way with you do, because it's less about, it's dangerous, but it's the illusion of danger, to where, because you guys are very controlled and you guys are doing it in the safest way you guys possibly can.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no question at all that it's dangerous. I mean, there's breathing techniques that you learn. Like, I mean, if you put a flaming torch in your mouth and you inhale, that's going to be the end of you. Like, you get that in your lungs and you're hooped. And I mean, it's happened to God knows how many fire performers over the years. But again, it's that it makes you bodily aware. Now all of a sudden you're practicing breathing, and you're practicing all of these different things. And I don't think that, it's necessarily that it makes it less magical. I think it's just, it makes it more understandable. And then when it becomes more understandable, people go, oh man, like, okay, so, that it's not something that's, I'm looking at that's paranormal. Well, hold on, what's paranormal? Paranormal is something that's a piece of science that we don't understand yet. Mm-hmm. So it kind of has that nice overlap.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that paranormal is just anything out of the realm of what's normal. I mean,
exactly.
To me, because people ask me before, they're like, do you think Bigfoot's paranormal? I'm like, yeah, it's not normal. I mean, we don't know much about it. I mean, we have people going out there looking all the time, and we're not. Speaking of that, what is your take on Bigfoot? Like, what do you think that is?
Oh, it's such a good question. My feeling about it is that there's probably something flesh and blood that's there. But I mean, again, I wouldn't begin to hazard a guess, because at the same time you can have something that seems super physical and then it turns out to be, sort of a bit of both. But I have a funny feeling that it's something that's physical. It's just my gut instinct on it. I know my friend Terry Lynn Blake, I know she would disagree with me, because the First Nations people here very much believe that it's something spiritual. Yeah. But then, for me, when I look at this stuff, I think all of this stuff has an element of spirituality. It's just a matter of, how much. I mean, we have an element of that spirituality as well. So I think it's like, where is this thing on the continuum? I don't know.
Yeah.
But, do I think it's real? Absolutely.
And I had a friend, he's Lipan, Apache. They don't call themselves Apache, they call themselves Lipan, but the term is Apache, even though it's a Comanche word that means enemy. But, he was coming back from a powwow, and we were talking one time, and he was telling me, he had stopped in Austin years ago, and he was, at that time he was living in Missouri. So he came through, and there was a big one down in South Texas, and he was telling me that they were talking about Bigfoot. And he said that there were like over 400 people there that were, full-blooded Native Americans, and he couldn't find one person that believed that Sasquatch was a completely physical creature. Now, physical, yes, but not completely physical.
Yeah.
And it's very weird, because it's kind of like when you and I've never actually done this, but I have a friend, like you were talking about Australia, a friend of mine that lives in Australia, and I guess it would be one of my sister's friends that I met through her. I'm not like real close with him or anything, but I remember him telling us that when he worked in Australia, he would talk to the Aboriginal people, the inhabitants there that were there before everyone showed up. The prison colony basically is what it was. And he said that they talked about Dreamtime. And they talked about the Yahweh, and that like it was a physical creature, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So when they would talk about it, the natives always kind of like, and it's really hard to comprehend, because a lot of people say, well, they acknowledge that it's physical, but then they say it's not. So then that leaves some sort of loophole there. But in reality, what they're saying is what I believe they're saying is that it manifests as a physical creature, but it's not completely physical. But what you said about us being not completely physical is true too, because we are just spiritual beings inside of a body,
Exactly.
you know, and so they can be too. They just have access to a different plane of existence. And I believe that they can come and go a lot differently than we can, because I've actually taken drones out to high traffic areas that are known for Dogman and Bigfoot and never saw anything.
Yeah.
We went out one time and we had a telescope and we had drones, we had all kinds of stuff. And I mean, we tried everything. We hung Tony out there as bait, holding bananas.
I mean, we've tried all kinds of fruits, pears, kiwis. I mean, we've gone exotic, and nothing seems to really work.
Dragon fruit,
You guys are
screaming
getting
and yelling,
expensive.
threats. You know, we tried doing the Zach Baggins thing, like, what's up? You know, what's up, Bigfoot? You know, and we tried to intimidate him, and we tried beef jerky. That didn't work. Nothing.
Commercials lie to you. So
They lie, basically. And we were like, well, this is fruitless. Maybe we should leave our own yard, though, and do something else. I'm just kidding. No, we were out there in the middle of nowhere. But we did hear some weird, like we heard wood knocks one time, which I know that it was wood knocks. And there was only one skeptic, my nephew Zane, who's like, that's not wood knocks. And I was like, well, how about we do this? How about we leave you out here and we take off and go down by the docks, and then it's 3 miles away. You can walk over there. Well, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'll leave you a
their
high-powered
opinion
flashlight.
changes so fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, his opinion of it was still that it was not wood knocks, but he wasn't willing to risk himself by staying there with a high-powered flashlight.
That's hilarious.
And then he goes, well, I need one of the guns. So I said, well, here's a flare gun. Enjoy that and see what happens. If he kept saying it was a flagpole, and my wife's like, where is there a flagpole out here? There is no flagpole. So I don't know what you're talking about. And you could hear it too. It was like from spot to spot. And so when Barton Nunley was down, I took him out there and we drove around. Of course, we didn't hear anything, but it was just that one time. But I do believe that it was wood knocks. It was what we heard.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything, unusual, and I didn't smell anything. But who knows? I mean, when you at the end of the day, everybody has their own opinion. But you is unique, though, because you, into parapsychology, you look at things you are approaching these things from a spiritual, how would you say it, like overtone, undertone? I don't know. Like you kind of look at it from that angle, like that's your base. So
Yeah.
I would take what you say as like a little more, I would take it more into consideration if you said, hey, this is a completely physical thing. Because it's coming from someone whose background is not grounded in these things being physical. It would make more sense for you to say, well, I don't really think this thing is completely physical.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, it's so interesting when you look at this phenomenon, because you kind of have to take every especially in the cryptid world. I find you have to take a step back from each one separately, because there's the people that sort of put everything into the category of physical and say, these things are physical and that's it. And then the other category is like, no, they're all, some sort of spirit or something like that, and it's over there. And I always find it interesting that people tend to kind of draw that line, like there is a line, right? And it's like, but there really isn't that line. There's a continuum, and everything and everyone is on that continuum to some degree, and to the degree that we want to be able to sort of tap into that, the degree that we want to be able to put aside the mind and put aside the ego and tune into that part of us that is connected. And I think once you can sort of take the blanket of it has to be in this category or that category and take that off of it, then it becomes a little bit easier to wrap your mind around the idea that there's something here. We don't know what it is, but if we can sort of pull our opinions back a little bit and stop being so rigid about this it has to be physical or not, then I think doors start to open up and things become a little bit more explainable. Not a lot, but a little,
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like people forget the most important thing is that you don't know anything about it.
You bet.
If you can just accept that, then you'll be able to look at things with a much better perspective and at least, clarity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to be able to, and that I think is where the clarity comes from as well, is being able to sort of sit down and tune into that. I think there's a very deep clarity that has to come from within first, before you start picking up on clues as to what these things might be. Because I mean, as soon as you're narrowing yourself into one category or another, then you start to miss. It's almost like confirmation bias. Like you just start to miss these bits and pieces that other people are telling you. And I think that's where oftentimes our cultures end up running into issues with like the First Nations and the Indigenous lore with this, because in Canada, like you guys, especially in Alberta, we're very, very much steeped in that. We've got very strong Indigenous communities here, and I think we're so quick to dismiss, when they say, no, there is, Dogman, there is Sasquatch, there is all of this. And they're absolutely certain. I mean, in Canada, there is no question. They're just like, it just is. They are what they are. And, but, we tend to dismiss that, like folklore is something that's untrue. And I always say in my classes, and I said in my last book, that folklore can be true, it can be false, but it's always getting something right. And when you get that, and you can stop sort of dismissing this stuff as some, old world fairy tale, then I think we're going to have a lot easier time trying to work out what's going on.
You do you actually go and investigate like hauntings?
Yeah, and I don't do it as much as I used to. Now I've really fallen more into the education side, but I'm slowly kind of working my way back into the investigative field. But it's hard, especially in Canada, because here the attitude towards parapsychology and hauntings and anything paranormal is actually quite negative. Like it's seen as almost a liability from a lot of businesses and buildings and people. They don't want to talk about it. It's where you go to somewhere like I don't know, like Long Beach, you go to the Queen Mary, and the Queen Mary, every staff member on the Queen Mary is going to tell you a story that happened to them. Where here, you go to a restaurant or something like that, and the waiters and waitresses oftentimes will tell you, "Oh, we're not allowed to talk about that.
Yeah.
Don't ask us. We're not allowed to speak about it." Like it's very weird. It's a very different culture in Canada versus the U.S.
And Europe is like that too, very much.
Yeah, very much.
One of my friends, he's from Switzerland, and he sent me these like really, really beautiful pics or whatever, and he turned me on to this Instagram deal or whatever. And so I asked him, because he likes the show, and I said, what does your wife think of the paranormal? He goes, she's terrified. She will not talk about it, will not engage it. And he said that he made the mistake at a dinner party recently of bringing it up. And there were some people that were from Sweden, and they were there, and they were just like, what is this? Why are we talking about this? This is not something we talk about. And they were just not having it, Like I told them, I said, you talking about my show? And he goes, yes. And they were just like, oh, that guy must be crazy.
Yeah, and that's
so
funny.
I was like, so I told him, I said, no problem, dude. I'll just, just keep checking out the show and go up into the attic and creep up there at night, away from everybody and listen to it. So nobody knows thinks you're crazy. But that's really sad. And a buddy of mine he's from Hong Kong, and he was a kickboxer, and for years he trained in Phuket in Thailand, and he's retired now, and he's living in Hong Kong. And he was telling me all these stories of these ghosts and stuff. And he said that there was a restaurant he liked to go to, and it's actually a 24-hour joint. So he said he went in there, and he said he mentioned something about this spirit that they call and Tony, we were talking the hopping ghost. And the guy literally asked him to leave.
Wow.
He was just like not having it. He was like, no, we don't talk about that here. No, you go, get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, okay. And then the guy like literally told him in 3 different languages to just go away because he did not want to hear it. And so he did. And he was like, dude, now I've been kicked out of my, because I had asked him because one of the waitresses there was actually, she was she wasn't from Hong Kong. She was from not Thailand, Cambodia. Well, she was Cambodian,
Okay. Yep.
and so he asked her, and she was very open about it. Which I guess there, and I guess where your mom is from, Tony, Vietnam, they're a little more open about it there too.
Yeah, I mean that's where I kind of get my beliefs on, because it's always been like, yeah, it's there, it's like it's never been a problem, but we just don't talk about it. Like my mom, she would just say like, oh, you have these couple stories and they exist, but she never really went into details about it
Until later.
on
Yeah.
what stuff happened. But
Yeah, because there was some stuff that happened at your house too. His house was haunted for sure. I mean, there were some weird things that happened in that house. But yeah, his mother was just like, she was more open about it, that they're talking about it, because I think different cultures are, but apparently, it's still like not as accepted or talked about like it is here. And my friend was telling me, he was like, dude, he goes, here in the States, when last time he had come to visit was a few years ago, and we were working out, we were at the gym where we train or whatever, and he was like, he goes, dude, it's very, over here you can talk about it. It's like you have shows and everybody's talking. He said, nobody's doing that over there. They're not talking about this kind of stuff because they are terrified of it. And somebody just said, what do you think Phil Stern would come out and give his encounter? Yeah, Phil Stern was supposed to come on this show. He's from Germany, and actually I talked to Phil the other day about the same thing. He's another guy. He's from Germany, and he said the same thing. They just don't really talk about it. One of my friends, he works for Tesla now. His name is Jerome, and he was my roommate for a few years, and he's from Germany. But his mother was German. His dad was an American. And one of the things that he told me was that they lived in a haunted house on the barracks there in the military. And he said that when he talked about it openly, his dad told him, be quiet, don't talk about that. That they're not, it's like, don't talk about it. And then I had a friend, my friend Bones, who actually gets his nickname Bones, but he stayed in China when he was a kid with his dad. Worked over there in China. And he actually told the landlord about a ghost that he saw. He saw a lady when he was in the kitchen one time, and she was just standing there staring at him, and then she just poof, she was gone. And then when he brought it up, he was chastised. Like they were like, don't talk about that. Like it's just very, it's just not like it is here. And it's interesting that you're just in Canada. You're our neighbor to the north, and it's kind of the same thing, And when I was in Monterrey, Mexico, we talked about Manos Peludos, which is a story about the hairy hand, and I was actually playing poker in this little dive bar that I made friends with some people there. My mom used to go out with a guy who owned a horse ranch down there, and we went back to his home to visit. It was a beautiful place. He was a really nice guy. He was a chef up here, and so we went down there and we visited, and I was a teenager. Well, I was pretty wild, so I'd sneak out and go run around in the streets, and I ended up making friends at this bar, and I was playing cards, and when I said the Manos Peludos, they just all got real quiet. Everybody kind of clammed up, and nobody was talking or looking, because the story is of the hairy hand. It's a story about the cards are playing cards, and then they got so drunk that they were dealing the cards to the devil's hands, and so everybody kind of got freaked out when I mentioned it, and I was like, wow. It's just a whole different culture. It's a whole different world. But I do believe here in the States, we're kind of at the forefront of bringing this stuff to the mainstream, because you turn on the TV and it's all over the place. There's all these stories, there's people yelling at demons and, oh, what's up, demon? And then there's people chasing Bigfoot and feeding it donuts and doing all kinds of stuff, and it's like, you know what I mean? It's like all this stuff going on. It's like a big party. And all these people from all over the world are watching us, and they're like, wow, you blokes over there in the States are having a great time, But
it's open, that conversation is open and on the table. And it's a really, really important and wonderful thing. And I think it's giving, I think, a lot of the shows, they're so staged and it's just painful, some of them, but it's, but at the same time, it's at least put it on the table for people to talk about. And it's taken that taboo off of it, which I think is really important. And I know, Dan Aykroyd, that's one of the reasons why he wrote Ghostbusters, was because he has a seat with the Society of Psychical Research, and that was one of his aims. Was he really, really wanted to make parapsychology a household topic. And it's been a goal of mine as well. And to me, America's perspective and the the culture and the fact that, you can go to these different cities and towns and whatnot, and they're celebrating whatever difference, they might have, whether it be Bigfoot or, the Van Meter visitor or, whatever it is. Like Mothman, yeah, like they've embraced that. And to me, I think there's so much to be learned from that, because you couldn't find a Bigfoot festival up here if you threw a stick a million miles. They don't exist. And it's like, nope, it just doesn't exist. And yet, I'll hold a show. I just finished an arena show in September, and it was full. Everybody wants to learn. They want to be there. They want to, they want to participate. They think it's amazing, but it's like when it comes down to, do we want to, put together this thing and be known for it? They won't go there. And it's really, really interesting. So no, I absolutely applaud the states. I'm hoping to bring some of my my live shows down your way at some point in the next year.
I covered a case up in Canada, and I'm sitting here trying to remember the province. I think it was Quebec. In fact, I know it was, and I did it on DER. It was a show I did a long time ago, and I talked about this. He was a logger. And he was sitting up in one of these really, really big trucks, and he got attacked. Well, he didn't get attacked. A dogman tried to get up into the cab with him. But I've had, over the years, I've had lots of people. It was really weird, but it was like it was pulling it down and was looking at him like, I'm hungry, and he was terrified. Finally, he got a hold of the people behind him. They were asleep in their truck, and they weren't answering the deal. And he said it was like 40 kilometers back to their base camp, so they just stayed the night there in that clearing. And this creature, he thinks, it had been stalking him for a while. I think there was more than one, too. But he was so... I don't know what he was more afraid of, like his encounter or me saying his name. He called me twice and he said, I don't be saying my name on your show, the way he had this accent, And I was like, he goes... It's not a good thing up here to talk like that and be saying, I saw this, I don't want people knowing Clint Trevisan saw. I'm just kidding. That's not his real name. I'm just. Yeah. But he kept telling me, he was like, he gave me an alias to say, and he was very adamant about it. And finally, we were just like, hey, it's me and my brother that had talked to the guy, and we were like, dude, we're not gonna say your name. We're not gonna come out and say your name. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But when he listened, he messaged me and he was like, thank you for not saying my name. And I was like, good grief, dude. Because other people had kind of been like, they'd tell me, they'd be like, well, maybe you shouldn't, own a business.
Or just use my first name. Or
just use my first name.
Yeah.
Or just, but this guy, he was like 4 or 5 messages about it. And I was just like, I put him at ease. I said, look, dude, I kind of have a habit of just not doing that just so people don't come back later on, because somebody did come back later on and go, oh, well, people were making fun of me and blah, 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 and I don't want that to happen. But it just seemed like the Canadians, they were pretty adamant that they didn't want that. And one of them, I know another story I got, they didn't even want me saying the area where it happened. It was in Montreal, and it was a story I got, and they were just like, can you not even say that it was in the tunnels down there? I was like, okay, fine. Yeah. They wanted me to change the location even. I was like, good grief. So I kind of now talking to you, I kind of figured that out, because I guess before I really hadn't even thought, that was what was going on. But now I know, I guess, at least I started to kind of suspect, but it wasn't in my mind that people in Canada are so much more criticized for that, than they are down here.
And that's really interesting to me, because I'm not saying this is probably how it is, but I would think in areas like Vietnam or more Eastern, it's less about fear or maybe the being criticized in public, and more about you don't want to draw anything to you, so you just keep it out of your mouth, and it's like a tradition of just keeping silent about it because you don't want to draw anything to you. You want to put it in your mouth so that it hears about you, or it gets it, you don't want to get its attention at all. Mm-hmm. So it's like a tradition in that sense, instead of being like, oh, people might talk badly about you in public because you have this belief. And I think that's a big difference that, you don't really see.
I think the European take on it is very much like they don't want to be looked at as crazy. Mm-hmm.
I think that's here as well.
Yeah, I think Canada too, but I think in the Far East where you're from,
it's like a tradition of just keep silent about it. Maybe even in Mexico, I would think.
Yeah, it is in Mexico too, but they're more of afraid of it because my tias and my tios, they would always tell me like, "Mijo, don't talk about it. You're gonna talk it up. You're gonna talk it up."
Yes.
You know, and they would be like, "La Llorona is real. You know, don't be talking about it because they hear you. You know."
Yeah.
And so they were just very guarded against like the Kukui coming out of the closet and doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I used to always be like, this is mentiras. These stories to scare kids. I don't care about. This is bullcrap. Hombre lobo es cadejo. You know, whatever. I don't care.
Oh, fantasmas.
Yeah, fantasma. Until you see it, and then you're like, holy crap. So maybe all of this other stuff is real. And I've been out there talking a bunch of crap, and maybe that's why I'm seeing it, because my mom, the first words out of her mouth were, "Mijo, you saw the devil?" "Yeah, because you talked about it." And I'm like, what? Like, I hadn't even talked about this. And she was like, "That's because you talk about it. You got the big mouth." And she's like, "Cállate la boca, pendejo, you know, siéntate, you know," and just telling me. And my mom was one of those Mexican moms. She would smack you with the chancla with every syllable, okay? Like, she didn't care. It was like, you're gonna learn today. She was like the Denzel Washington of Mexican moms. And you're gonna learn today, boy.
You're wondering why you're speaking Spanish, but every time you do, you're flinching.
And I would always be like, and then I'd keep talking. She'd, "Why are you talking?" "I'm not talking." Of course, you're still talking, but you know. And I would just be like, "You don't know nothing. You don't know." And she'd be just smacking me. "I know everything. I have eyes in the back of my head," you know. But yeah, I had to learn the hard way, because I would always talk about stuff, and then she'd be like, "Don't talk about it." Because I remember one time when we were in Temple, Texas, visiting my tia, her house was haunted. And me and my mother both clearly saw something move in Wella was my great-grandmother. She was full-blooded Comanche. And we saw something move. All she did was sit in the room and pray all day and read the Bible. And we saw something move, and it wasn't her. She was sitting at the table with us, and we looked at each other. My mom put her finger to the mouth like, you know, "No, we don't talk about that. And Grandma doesn't need to hear that." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." So I didn't say anything. It was just like, we don't talk about it. We just pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's how you were supposed to approach this. And of course, my tia Hova, the first thing she said when I told her, she's like, "I told you that hombre lobo is out at night. And it's a warning, you know, it's a devil, it's a demon, you know, you saw that, it's a diablito, you know." And so, you know, it's like you did something to see it. Like that was the culture. Like, you wouldn't be seeing it if you weren't bad. You know what I mean? If you were good, you wouldn't be seeing this creature, you know?
Yeah, I was like, you deserved it.
Yeah. And it's weird because then they have these like festivals in Germany where they all dress up as Krampus.
Yeah. Actually,
and, you know,
I just
and they're
wrote
like,
an article for
it's like there's a time and a place
Magazine.
for it.
Yeah, I just wrote an article for Haunted Magazine about Krampus. It'll be out coming up. I guess it'll be the next issue. I guess just November, December. But and I did a deep dive into Krampus and how far it actually went in Austria. And you know, we see all these parades with these, you know, all these people dressed up with these fantastic costumes and whatnot. But yet you go back into even the Alpine communities today, and the kids and whatnot are absolutely terrified. December 5th, you go back even 1930s and onwards, where the neighbors would dress up in these Krampus suits and come over and literally raid people's homes, like pull the kids out of beds, pull them into the yard, like horrifying stuff. And you know, and the you know, that generation now, they look back on it and they're like, "Oh yeah, like, I mean, you should have seen it." Like December 5th, the entire day, kids were sitting, like hiding in their rooms, like petrified, because the parents would just like let the neighbors in, right? You just let the neighbors, like complete crazy. And so I mean, it's funny because like we see all the parades and we see like, you know, we're like, "Oh, that's like super cool." And yeah, very, very much pageantry. And yet, you know, you've got like these smaller communities that keep to the original tradition. And the
Have like
original tradition is
PTSD walking around.
horrifying. Yeah.
They're in the shower just rocking every December 5th.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Brushing their teeth 5 times. Well, you know what's crazy? Like me and Tony, we did a deep dive on when we did the Krampus episode. And I got a bunch of stories that I had, and it took about 4 or 5 years to get that many to get together, you know. And that's why I haven't done another one, because I've only gotten 1 or 2 since then. Typically, when I do a show, I'll get people that'll come out and say, "Hey, I've seen this and that."
Sure.
But nothing that I can say enough to do another Krampus episode. But I did do a Krampus episode, and it was a pretty terrifying subject. And I know when you were doing the research on it, Tony, you were like talking about how, I'm not going to use your exact wording, but you said that he would come along with Saint Nick and he would beat the crap
Yeah.
out of kids,
Yeah, I
and
tried
put
to make it rhyme, and I was like, oh,
yeah, and he would
it's
just
funny,
like,
though.
and it was like, dude, it was basically like these children would get their butts whooped, and then he would drag them out in a bag, and it was just crazy. It was like, wow, this is like sadistic. Like
It
these,
was like carrot and stick, but the stick was a lot worse than anything you can imagine.
so he was telling me all this, and I was like, well, I thought he was just kind of, before all that, I knew who he was, I knew what he was, but I had not gone really deep into these. And then we went back in our archives and found stories that were obviously very that matched up to the Krampus, whatever. And then I got a couple that seemed more Goatman like, but I didn't know if that was really Krampus or what.
It was just kind of like the right timing of the
Yeah,
year.
because it was at Christmas time, and Goatman was like trying to beat the crap out of people. But I mean, it was, the point is that it would terrify you as a kid. You'd be like,
Absolutely.
I can't imagine being in my house and people come running in the house and beat the crap out of me, and my parents are like, yeah, that's what you get.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
and the
imagine
crazy
growing
thing
up,
was-
and then 20 years later, you go to the big city, and they just have a big old festival of the
Yes.
monsters that used to go into your house and beat you up.
And you
Well, and
start,
the
start having
crazy
an
thing was, too,
anxiety
is that,
attack.
yeah, you had these people who, the kids knew that it was people dressed up. Like, they weren't thinking, okay, well, this is Loki's grandson that's like breaking into my house. Like, they weren't thinking this, right? They knew that it was neighbors, and
Yeah.
they knew that it was like family and whatnot that were going to, but it didn't matter. It probably made it worse, because it's like, you know that these people that you're trusting are, going to like literally start bashing your windows in and whatnot. And then the female Krampus was actually worse, if that's even possible. But the female one, because the Krampus creatures belong to this kind of offshoot of these demonic creatures. And the female one would actually take the kids, gut them, string up their intestines, and then would stuff them full of rocks and sticks and sew them back up. Like, it was right out of Hellraiser.
Oh, yeah, I read this. I didn't know
Terrifying.
that there was different versions. I just thought this was something
Yeah.
else that Krampus did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember you
absolutely, like,
telling me something
horrifying.
And
like
but
that.
you were like, oh, I think that's too much to put on the show.
Yeah,
And I
we
was
were
like,
just like, yeah, that was like, because
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
and it is
really
the
scary.
demonic, very demonic entity. But it was weird that it was like the duality of like, oh, one's bringing you presents because you were good, the other one's going to kill you.
Yeah, and that wasn't until later. That was instituted until later in the folklore as well, where it didn't start that way. It started just, Krampus was this creature, but then, once they kind of started tying it into the St. Nicholas story, then it was like, oh, we can make this story about, tie in St. Nicholas, and that, he's the giver, and then Krampus is the punisher and whatnot. But I mean, it didn't start like that. When they were writing, about him in the ancient legends and stuff like that, when they were writing about, creatures like Loki and whatever gods, then, he kind of popped up in the middle of that. And yeah, but really, really scary stuff. We like do horrible things to each other.
Yeah. Well, one of
You
my
know?
friends is from the old days, and we call him Loki. And one of my friends, who, like I was saying, I have a friend, he's from Norway, and he was telling me, he goes, "You call your friend Loki? This is not a good thing." And I'm like, yeah, well, I got friends with my brother, we call him Diablo. I mean, so, when you hear that name and you speak Spanish, you're like, what? The devil, but I mean, they all have reasons for their nicknames, like I'm Wolf, obviously, because what I saw, and I went around talking about it, and people were like, you're crazy. So they started calling me that. Wolf Boy was the appropriate term. The guys I played ball with, they were like, "Oh yeah, Wolf Boy." Coach started calling me that, and they started calling me that, and then it just made me play harder. And then people quit making fun of it, and it got shortened to Wolf. And so a lot of people, like you, Tony, when you were a kid, you probably thought they called me Wolf because I was a big ferocious guy. I worked downtown.
Yeah, I always thought that a better name would be Bear. Cause you look like a bear. Because I always thought it was weird that your name was Wolf. Because I was like, if you saw him, you'd be like, how did he get that name?
Yeah, it had nothing to do with
It had nothing to
ferocity.
do with really anything that you had to do back then. It was because of what happened to you when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm. When I was 15 years old, what I saw.
Yeah.
And so, Morgan, how can the fans here? How can they reach you? Your books, your website. How do they interact with you, or what do you got going on? Conferences? What's going on?
Oh gosh, everything. And the one-stop shop is entityseeker.ca. and you can find everything there. There's links to my books. There's links to all the events that are coming up. If you want to get a hold of me and book my show, I do travel, so that's always handy. So you can just shoot me a message through the website, and of course, I'm on all the links for social media, Facebook, everything. entityseeker.ca. It's your one-stop shop, and my podcast as well, Supernatural Circumstances.
Supernatural
Are you in
circumstances.
are you in the YouTube chat at all? Because I was gonna say,
I'm not at the moment.
if you post it on there, I'm pretty sure Anthony can go ahead and highlight that so that they can make sure that they get that.
Or
Alec, either
Alec
one.
would do it.
Oh, if somebody could send, let me see if I can find it here. If I go I'm not on YouTube at the moment, so I'm just sitting here on Facebook. Let me find it.
Wow, somebody says here in the chat, a guy I told about my haunted house called me Ghost Girl. That would aggravate me.
Oh,
That
man.
would really aggravate me. I'd probably pull a prank on him and scare the crap out of that person.
Oh, that's great. That's crazy. Oh, I'm not finding the link. People might just have to type it in.
One of my James Estrada, one of my admins, just put your name in there in capital letters, Morgan Knudsen, or Knudsen. Sorry.
Here we go. Yeah, as I say, entityseeker.ca is the one-stop shop, and my podcast, Supernatural Circumstances, you can download on any platform, and iHeartRadio and Audible and all of wherever you podcast, it'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely enjoyed having you on. A very interesting individual, folks. Check her out. And I'd be interested in getting some books from you to do for my giveaways, especially when we drop this episode. How many books have you written so far, Morgan?
I've got 2, Teaching the Living from Heartbreak to Happiness in a Haunted Home, and The Gift of Instinct, Paranormal Lessons for an Extraordinary World. And then recently, I also did all the illustrations and the foreword for Chad Lewis's upcoming book, Winter Legends and Folklore.
Yeah,
so
he
that'll
talked
be coming
about
up
that
as
on my
well.
show recently. I'm sorry for
Yeah.
interrupting you. So you did the illustrations for that.
I did, yeah, and I wrote the foreword as well.
Awesome. Yeah, because he was just on with me and Barton, and we talked to Chad, and we had such a good time talking to Chad. We were like, man, we can talk to Chad all day. He's great.
Absolutely.
I love Chad. He's awesome, and he's a really good friend of my dear friend Linda Godfrey. So
Yeah.
yeah, she considers him one of the old school of her friends,
Yeah.
But Chad does a lot of good work, and so do you. And I appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
on. Any chance maybe we're going to be having another Dogman conference? It's going to be down in New Mexico. Any chance you might make your way down to America and go to the Dogman conference this next September?
I would absolutely love that. We'll chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay. All right, Morgan. Well, I'm going to let you run. I appreciate you coming on, and very
Thank you,
entertaining
Josh.
guest.
Oh, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all of you guys and everything that you're doing and the conversations that you guys hold, because they're so important to have. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So you have a good night, Morgan.
You too.
All right. All right, bye. So that was Morgan Knudsen. I keep saying it wrong. Knudsen. Pretty interesting. Interesting stuff about Krampus too. We already knew Krampus was kind of a douchebag, but now we really think he's a douchebag.
Well, the female one, though,
And they're like,
apparently.
yeah, she's even meaner, which doesn't surprise me. A lot of times in this folklore, they'll be like, how can we top this? Let's make the female even worse than the men, do even more bad stuff, to make it even more, But yeah, folks. So when we last left off from the earlier whatever, I'm going to leave you with one good story here. I got a story I wanted to tell. I always try to say this, but I don't want to give too much. I don't want to give too much away because we got the Halloween episode coming up next Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone that donated while she was talking.
Yes, thank you everyone that donated. Dumpster Diving, Dogman, Sugar
Yeah.
Britches, Grace W. Thank you so much, everybody, because believe
Means
it or
a lot
not,
to us.
we definitely are broke and we need money. Even though I wear all this gold, this is actually my investment, folks. I actually took my gold and melted it down into jewelry. So I figured if I'm going to have it, I'm going to wear it because it's my hedge against inflation.
And these, I exclusively fight little girls, and I stole these. These are my victory weapons that I won.
You fought,
so.
but you know what? You beat those 10-year-olds fair and square.
Well, not all of them,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
You're the intergender elementary school champion. You're so diminutive though, and so puny in your physical body that some of the girls that you fight are actually bigger than you,
Yeah,
even though they're
I
in
mean,
fourth grade or
it's an
fifth grade.
unfair battle in the playground, but it's a tough reign to hold, and it's a struggle really to think about because it's like, do I really want to hurt this little girl? And in the end, it's like I have to maintain my superiority.
Even though the last one did give you a black eye, she was tough. She was in gymnastics. I saw that fight.
Yeah, flexible. Though hit me with the spinning kick, I didn't handle it.
Yeah, we're gonna eventually get him up to where he can fight above grade school kids and he can fight middle schoolers. Don't know if that's gonna be in the cards or not.
I'm not
because
ready
he's so
for
weak right now. Even training with Ed Brown's not really helping.
male fights yet. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna be stepping into my ring. I think Banjo's been training me.
But you're kind of
gonna
like
try
Andy
to-
Kaufman, except Andy Kaufman fought grown women. You're too scared to do that. So
Oh yeah, I mean,
Right, Alec?
That's a tougher man than me.
he's trying to work his way up through the ranks. Eventually, maybe we can get you on some cracked out bums that are emaciated from drug use, so you can fight or whatever. But I wouldn't count on it, folks.
Like Mike
Tony
Tyson
is quite
says,
weak. He's a very weak individual. One of my arms weighs, I think, as much as his entire upper half of his body.
Hey, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Mike Tyson.
Everybody got a plan until they get punched in the face. So anyway, I have a story, and this was given to me not too long ago, and this happened right outside of Branson, Missouri, which is it's kind of isn't Branson? That's like a resort town or something, I think, right? They have all kinds of stuff there or whatever. But that's what it was. These people were on vacation, and this can imagine they went through a car wash. One of those car washes where you know how the soap comes down on your car and you're driving through it and and everything's cool. And they see this. Now, I can't say that it was a Dogman because it wasn't on two legs, but it was as tall as the hood of the car. And it had a ridge on its back, and they were sitting there talking. It was a husband and wife, and she was in the driver's seat and she was driving, and she was just like, I don't know, what this thing is, but she says, I think I saw something walk in front of the car wash, and he's like, oh, you're just, he didn't see it. He kept saying, I didn't see. She goes, no, watch. And so when the water went up, this thing was right there on his side of the car. It walked like right by their car. And he said it looked right in at him. And he said it was black and his mouth was open and it was getting covered in soap and water and did not care. Like it absolutely did not care. And then it put its big old paws up on the window and it began to push their car. So she does what any sane human being would do and just sat there through the entire cycle. And she's like, I can't leave yet. The hot wax has not come.
It's a waste of like
it's-
what, $12.
so-
I mean,
No, but seriously, it was toward the end of the cycle, and that is actually what happened. Like the hot soap or wax, whatever. She couldn't tell me. I think she was trying to say it was the wax, but then it hit this thing, and it kind of went down, and then it kind of like made a weird noise, and it ran out the other side. So when they were back coming out, this thing walked toward their vehicle again and tried to go at their tire, and they burned off. And she was like, I don't know what that was. I don't know why it was. I don't know why that thing was trying to attack our car. And I said, what kind of car? She says, I had a Subaru Outback. I said, that's why. Because you had, no, I'm just kidding. But seriously, though, I mean, it was no joke. And I'm not making fun of her story, but it was, she said that this is crazy. It was like this thing came out. She said it was grayish black. And it didn't look exactly like a wolf. It looked kind of like a wolf, but not totally like a wolf. And she said that it was just a terrifying looking creature. And its eyes weren't like glowing or anything like that. But she said there was something wrong with this thing. It might have been rabid, but she said it was huge. She said it looked almost like a wolf bred with like an Irish wolfhound. And it was really shaggy and it was dirty and nasty. And she said that even through the car wash, they could smell it inside the car, and it got the smell, and it even had this sulfur-like smell that was inside their car, and they said that they couldn't get it out for like weeks. It was still faintly there. So that's a weird story, and so I thought I'd throw that one in there. And then I got another one really quick because we were talking about reptilians earlier, and we were talking about the lost city of Irim, which is I'm going to actually do a deep dive on that. We're going to go deeper into that, and we're going to do more on the subject of the Middle East. And but this one comes from the Far East, and we were talking about some friends of mine who had trained, and they lived in Thailand, which is Siam, and there's all these legends and stuff. And Thailand is one of those countries because it's kind of landlocked. It's in the middle of Southeast Asia, and it's not surrounded. It's surrounded by other countries, and it's kind of up in there. And they have an extremely amazing fight culture there. I've never been. I've always wanted to go just to go and observe the kickboxers there, in those different places like Phuket. But this guy, he was a friend of a friend, I guess you could call him. And this was a story that was given to me. He was training with a guy. And this would freak anybody out, right? And he said that when they locked up and they got each other in this kind of standing clinch, which kickboxers do, and he was going to throw like a low-level kick, he felt this person's skin. And this person, he goes, dude, I owned a python. Okay? He's like, I had a Burmese python. He goes, and it was very, very, very used to being handled. He said, this person's skin literally felt like that. And he says, and I look up, and this person's eyes were slitted up, and their face right here, he goes, the face was like, there was like two slits for the nose, and their mouth was like turned inward. He goes, and he looked like a snake. And he's like, I backed up, and then this guy popped me with a kick. And then he came to, kind of looked at this guy after he saw the sparks fly, as we say. And he said, dude, he was normal again. He's like, but I'll never forget, dude. He goes, he looked like a reptile, like a snake-like creature, like this, whatever. And so when he was talking to one of the elders, the coaches there, the guy said, yeah, his family is part dragon. Like it was not even like they weren't even joking. It wasn't like there was like, oh, yeah, you should put, he's like a dragon. No, he said that his family, they're of another bloodline. I know that in the Indian culture, they call it the Nagas. But they're snake-like people. And he said that comes out sometimes when they fight. And he was like, not having, he was not into that at all. My friend was he's Chinese, but he was like, dude, I had never faced anybody like that, and he goes, it wasn't like he was any stronger than I was. He goes, because I didn't fight with him. But then again, he didn't fight with him anymore after that. But he said he kicked the crap out of me when I backed up because it was so shocking. But he said the guy was actually a nice guy, and they would go to eat dinner, and there was nothing unusual about the guy until they got into the ring that day. And he said he had thought one time when he was watching him spar with another fighter. Now, Tony, you know how it is when you're on the outside of the ring and you spar or whatever. When you're fighting your kids that beat you up sometimes. Don't lie, you don't always win.
Yeah, Thunderdome in the playground. I get it.
Yeah, and so they when you're watching, you know, because I know Deuce, your coach, he would always take video, which is smart. We didn't have that when I was younger, your age. We didn't have cell phones to take video of the fights. And Alec, your dad was a wrestling coach for years, and you know that. Your dad was a great wrestler. And we tried setting up a camera, but, when somebody has to set up the camera, you can't get all the angles. It's not like nowadays, Deuce just walks around the ring and he can video. Well, when Chang was telling me that, and that's my friend's name, but he was telling me that when the coach was going around later on, he looked at the video and he thought the guy's legs and his back kind of looked weird for a split second. He was like, whoa. So he thought he was seeing something. But then later on, one of the coaches told him point blank, this guy has a reptilian bloodline. Like it's there. It just exists. And now I haven't had a chance to talk to many of my other friends. My friend Nick Almazan actually is there, I think, now as we speak. He trains over there. And my other friend Trauma trained over there for years. And I haven't had a chance to actually ask them, about that, if they came across anything like that. Yeah, see, somebody said dragon people. But yeah, I'm going to definitely look more into that because that's a very weird story that Chang gave me. And I was just like, what the heck? But the funny thing is, he didn't know that I had a YouTube channel. He didn't know that I was doing this podcast stuff. He remembers me as a fighter and one of the guys here, and we just started talking one day because I ran into him and he was just like saying that, he had seen on my Facebook, a picture of, or I think it was maybe his Instagram of me and Eric Konevsky, Russian gangster. And he goes, yeah, I follow that guy, and I said, yeah, yeah. And we started talking, and he said that he was going to try and start a channel based on kickboxing and instructing. He wants to instruct now because he's getting older and he doesn't fight anymore. He just trains, kind of like your stepdad did, still trains or whatever, Tony. But he was saying that he wanted to do. I said, yeah, I have a channel. And when I told him about it, he goes, oh, really? He's like, dude, I got some crazy stories to tell you, and we haven't gotten into it. But he told me that one and one other that I'm going to save for another subject or whatever, another day. But that was really weird. Like, he told me that, and he goes, dude, the guy was straight up reptilian. Just straight up, man. It was just a strange, weird thing. But anyways, I get a million stories of all kinds of stuff, and I hope I didn't just talk too much at the beginning of the show, the first hour, just trying to get out what I had to say about the Middle East, giving you sort of just a quick rundown and a sample of what I'm going to be talking about and getting into. Now, I haven't decided if I'm going to do that one concurrent with the alien abductions. We'll see what happens, but I'm gonna start that up in November, and then we're gonna try and do a big drop. It will be me and Daniel Jones with Nick Redfern consulting, hopefully, and giving us some good stories and coming on and so yeah, be looking for that. That'll be in November, and then hopefully, I think by December we'll be dropping the Middle East, the episodes. Boom, 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 boom. Because I don't know if you guys like it to where we do these big drops and then you can just listen at your leisure, or if would you rather just me make an episode every week? Let me know.
I think a little bit of both might work too, where we do dedicated projects of things that we like a little more, but still have just drops that we could do.
I think that's really stupid.
We'll work it
anything
out.
that you come up with is really dumb. The fact that you get beat up by kids sometimes is just so frustrating to me. Although when you do the atomic elbow to finish it, I got to say that's pretty impressive, even though they are 10-year-old kids.
I don't know. I mean, when these parents come to me and complain about these broken elbows and these broken arms, I'm like, I don't know why you're sending me these tough kids who keep breaking my arms and elbows.
They're like,
I'm like, well, if you don't want my arms and elbows to be broken and me send you the bill, then stop sending tougher kids to
because
me.
you're constantly having to go to the hospital to get these. What was it last week, Alec? An ankle. He had an ankle lock. Kid was 12. Kid that beat him up last week in the gym. Was it? I think that's what it was.
And what's really annoying is I thought Alec would come down and
you thought
support
Alec was
me.
supposed to help you?
Yeah, and at least tie down
not a
at least
fighter,
one
are
or
you,
two.
Are you a fighter?
I
So
was really shocked when I showed up because I thought you needed help with the kid, like helping the kid.
No, we're here to destroy, maim, destruction.
you thought this kid was like having some problems. He's like, we're gonna mentor this kid. No, Mushu's actually there getting beat up and ankle locked. by
I'm the kid's problem.
Yeah, the
alright?
kid. You're the bully, but you're not a good bully because you're getting beat up about 50-50.
Well,
so.
I'm giving him confidence for the future. So in the way, I'm the hero.
And then you're teaching them that they can go around and smack grown men because why not? They're weak.
I mean, nowadays you can call them grown men, but that's not how I really see what's walking around.
I saw the green-haired man bun the other day, and I was like,
yeah.
"Oh, he could be me on the what you call what was it?" We saw this guy walking into he was going into Ln, and we were driving. We were in the vehicle, and one of you guys pointed and said, "Hey, it's the dude that played you on the Travel Channel on These Woods Are Haunted." And I was like, "Dang it, Michael! You didn't tell me you were going to use a guy with a man bun, dude." Oh my gosh, that was like, man. And everybody was like, "Hey, man, I saw you with the man bun on there." And I was like, "I've never had a man bun in my life." But if I ever was planning on it, I'm not now. I know that I won't look good in it.
Anthony, I think, already answered this, but I think it's important that we, bring it to front. Colin here asks, anyone know why Spotify isn't being updated with the new episodes? YouTube is nice, but not the best for when you're driving or at work with earbuds. Just curious if he's completely done with Spotify.
I think what the thing with Spotify is just that you can't. There's no monetization there, and like Alec, you pointed out that there's even like major. What did you say? There were major artists or something that aren't getting paid on it on Spotify.
I'm not sure.
I just feel like it's pretty.
You don't remember saying that?
Specific? I think it's just like there's certain creators that get it, and there's certain ones that don't, and it's harder to build and get something out of Spotify instead.
Well,
Where
Anthony, you can explain it a little better than anybody else. Do you want to
Yeah.
explain? Because we can't answer this question correctly. Go ahead and just tell them.
well, the Spotify question that you already answered, I thought maybe we should bring it out to more light so that other people can hear.
People keep asking why we're not on it.
Yeah, so we're not on. I mean, at the very least, for now, we're not on Spotify because Spotify doesn't make it easy for you to monetize your stream. So, like, if we upload our episodes to like Spotify and all the other podcast platforms, that's people are going to be listening to them. But if you're listening there, you're not listening on YouTube, and I mean, like we're not greedy, but this whole operation it costs a lot of money, especially since we're with Alec here, we're upping up the production value, and I mean we're having to buy like some really expensive equipment to do all this stuff.
Oh man.
So, but yeah, at the very least for now, at least until we can find a way to get properly monetized on the podcast platforms, we're just going to be sticking to YouTube.
And that was a decision that was literally made by my team, which was basically Alec and Anthony and my wife, and they were like, no more. And I said, okay. And then they began to smack me with wet noodles and get me to come back out here and pump out shows. I was told, get out there and do your job and shut up. And, I said, okay. So I'm going to do what they said. I'm just going to sit here.
I mean, we can ask Barton. I think he already left, unfortunately, for the night. But they keep us in cages, and they really just let us out
Dude,
when we're
you shouldn't
ready.
be talking about that.
Oh shoot! Hey, are we still on about the cages? I want Anthony to come back in here.
Everybody's looking to see where he's at. Oh, there he is. He was kidding.
I'm sorry,
He
Anthony.
was just joking.
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. We want nothing. And you don't need to watch the rest of this show either. We're good. We've done everything we're supposed to do. Okay. But anyway, folks, that's what's going on. You figured it out, okay? So we're gonna be pushing, getting more episodes out. Now, somebody had said something about the sound quality. There's something I really couldn't do about that, as some of our guests had. And then Barton was doing a lot of it by his phone. Barton's not the most technologically savvy guy. And he was having to sit outside and talk on his phone because he couldn't be inside the house on some of those. And so he was a trooper and he did what he had to do. But yeah, some of the audio, there's nothing I could do. It was on the guest's end, and I couldn't control that. So we did the best we could. And yeah, and so we are in the process of upgrading everything. Okay. We are trying to push the production value, like what you saw today, where we use the map and all that.
Things like the transitions.
Yeah, we haven't done that before, and now we're doing it because we're taking this to another level. But that requires money, and that's something that we need. Unfortunately, I hate to ask, but if you guys feel it in your heart to donate, that would be great, or join Patreon, that would be even better. Because that can help us get the equipment that we need to take this show to the next level. Once you have 20,000 subscribers, it's time to be a lot more, And that being said, I'm going to continue to bring you everything I can, the best quality content I can, and try to do deep dives and do as much work as I can on these shows. Because I do work, I do go out, and just like tonight, I have to go out and do my guard checks. I have to go and check my clients. I owe it to my clients to check on my guards. And so I have to go and do these things. And I am in between that, I have to read and I have to watch videos and I have to do all kinds of stuff to try to get the content out to you. Somebody said, skip the ads. I'm doing everything I can to keep the ads as low as possible, but I have to have some so that we can maintain a level of monetization so that we can continue to bring you this show. And that is the rub there, not to rub my eye while I'm saying that, but that's what we need, is just every now and then a little help. And what we're going to do is start doing a Patreon show that's going to be for Patreon exclusive people. And so, if you're a Patreon member, you're going to be able to interact with me in a way that you can't. It's not just like everybody else, And
then another thing that we've been talking about is maybe doing like some opening of some fan mail. It's just we have to get all that set up. So it's just there's a lot of things that we have planned that we're planning on just improving and making even better. And now that we have the time, unfortunately, we can definitely keep putting more into it, into the show, and making it just so that it keeps continuing being a product that we're proud of, and that that's worthy of our great fan base.
Yeah. And I always tell people, I brag on you guys all the time. And like my other podcast friends, my author friends, I'm like, you got fans? We got fans. Everybody got fans, but ain't nobody got fans like we got fans. So, we got the paratroopers. And they've been impressed. When we were at the Bigfoot conference, there were people that showed up that were like, we came here to see you. And, yeah, I rewarded those people, especially a couple of them that were Patreon members, and I just gave them free merchandise. I was handing out merchandise left and right because it's about promotion, We do have the new hoodies out, like I said, and unfortunately, I have not been able to get to the postal annex. I am not joking. I've not been able to mail anything out in about 2 weeks. If I owe you something, I've told you I'm going to send you something, email me, text me, or message me, whatever you got to do, get a hold of me. So I can get your stuff to you. I want to make sure everybody's happy. Okay. So that being said, thank you for tuning in. Once again, we did almost 3 hours. We do just about every time we're on here. We're going to come up with another night where I can do another show so that we have 2 live streams a night. If that's something that you'd like, well, then hit me up on the Paranormal Roundtable group in Facebook and say, yes, I would like you to do that. And we're going to see how many people go and do that. Go to Facebook, join. It's free to join, Paranormal Roundtable group. You'll see me. Somebody posted a picture of me sitting there, leaning in a chair or whatever. That's not me. Somebody said I was there trying to flex my tricep. See that tricep right there? See, I'm not even trying to do that. I'm not trying to show you how big it is. I'm not about all that. I'm not about all that showmanship and being like, look at my traps, how big they are. Stop. I know you guys love me. I know. I know. I'm great. And right now, there's people at home going, I hate this guy, but I can't stop watching his content. But I really hate this guy. But I really like his show, but I hate him. So, yeah, I understand. I hate me too, but I also like my content. It's weird. It's a weird thing. It's a very weird thing. So anyway, guys, for everybody here at Paranormal Roundtable, Alec, this guy across from me, Mochi, what do they call you?
Mookie,
like Mookie Wilson from the Mets. So anyways, good night. We'll see you.